across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And it's all kicking off. Yes, good afternoon. Welcome to the home of common sense. Downing Street in chaos as Keir Starmer's leadership crumbles under scandal after scandal, backing Peter Mandelson despite those obvious links for Epstein, losing key allies like Rayner and Omenden, and failing to justify his decisions. Starmer's credibility in tatters. I mean, it's a straightforward question. How long has this man got left? We'll look at that in more detail in just a second. Also this afternoon, the Tories have received another blow as a former health minister, Maria Caulfield, also deflects to reform. This follows Danny Kruger's shock exit yesterday, with 13 ex-Tories now backing Nigel Farage. Reform surges ahead in the polls, leaving Kemi Badenoch also in disarray, albeit for other reasons. And Donald Trump is arriving in the UK later for his state visit. The US president is expected to go easy on Keir Starmer as the Prime Minister faces those mounting pressures over handling recent events. We'll have more on that in a few moments' time as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. Very easy to get in touch. You want to drop us a voice note? It's the same as the phone number, 0344 499 1000. And, of course, you can message 87222. I can't really phrase it in any other way. How long has Keir Starmer got left? We've had loads of speculation over the last few months. You know, people say, well, he'll be gone by Christmas, gone by the end of the summer, then gone by Christmas, gone by next year. I think it's now looking more like, I don't normally join in with it because every time there's a new Prime Minister, if it's not your flavour of Prime Minister, you tend to speculate they can't possibly last because everything you see them do is invariably and understandably through the prism of your own politics. So you will always see someone who you wouldn't support as failing at every flipping level. But with Keir Starmer, there is demonstrable and objective truth in all of that. And now, when you consider where we're at, you do wonder, how long has he got left? I mean, just think about it. The last person in the world you want to be right now is Keir Starmer. Imagine waking up in the morning with half a dozen daggers in your back and a journey from bed to work, walking on 7 tons of eggshells. His position is not just brittle, but some might say untenable. He's caught in the headlights, his inner circle crumbling away, party loyalty sinking, his optimism lower than a dropped curve. Rayner, Mandelson, Ovenden, and all of that in just 10 days, by the way. His judgment is blown to pieces. He's now about as effective as a solar-powered torch. It's not good to be Keir Starmer. As if losing the Deputy Prime Minister wasn't bad enough, a week later he loses the UK ambassador to the US. Could his week get any worse? Well, yes, it did, because yesterday his chief strategist turned out to be a texting sex weirdo. But maybe we should focus on the politics. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt, OK? Let's say, look, this is all kind of a little bit of tittle-tattle. It's behind-the-scenes stuff. It's all sort of, it's not going to affect your everyday life. Let's actually look at the politics. OK, let's do that. How is growth looking, Mr. Starmer? We are flatlining like a drowning man. Zero. Absolutely nothing. The economy has conked out. How's the NHS, Mr. Starmer? Waiting lists are up. What happened there? They were going to come down almost immediately. They're up. Unemployment, as we've seen today, 4-year high. And how's that immigration policy going? You know the one, the genius one in, one out thing. Well, today, the first flight to France carrying people who crossed the Channel under Keir Starmer's one in, one out deal did not take place as planned. A small group of individuals were removed from an Air France flight on Monday due to travel from Heathrow to Paris after you've guessed it, a legal challenge. The flight went ahead, but with no migrants on it. I mean, you couldn't write this stuff. You judge, I know I repeat that same example every time. You couldn't stick it in an episode of House of Cards or The Thick of It and get away with it. It'd be all of this has happened in a couple of weeks to one man. Yes, and Keir Starmer is at the helm. He is the conductor. He is the man in charge of the whole thing. It's his credibility that is currently in shreds. How long has he got left? Next year, there's going to be, and many of our listeners have picked up on this, saying next kind of spring, you've got local elections next year, and of course you've got the Welsh Senate elections as well. That's going to be huge. Wales will be the deciding factor for Keir Starmer's fate. So if somebody were to say to me, how long you think he's got left, I would say right up to the Welsh elections. And then he's dust. He's gone. I don't know how you could possibly continue after that. He got a beating in the local elections this year, despite cancelling half of them. It looks as if, bearing in mind what's going on within his own party, and just as a kind of unscientific but anecdotally interesting, we rang our producers today, Finn and Louis, called a couple of dozen Labour voices. You know, can you come on and support, you know, Mr. Can you give the argument as to why Starmer's actually doing quite well? So we're booking this feature in, and we think let's ring some of those Labour people, some of them MPs, some councillors, some people that formerly worked with the party, etc. We struggled. And some outright saying, actually, I don't really support him anymore. Off the record saying they were kind of done. He's a busted flush. That's his own party. He's only been there just over a year, for God's sake. That's the kind of language people might speak in when somebody's been in power for, you know, maybe 5 or 6 years. Not 13 or 14 months. Seriously. He's in a bad place. How long has Keir Starmer got left? 0344 499 1000. And what I always love about phone-ins with the talk audience is I don't really need to put any more meat on the bones, because I know many of you will have a few other angles on where it's gone so badly wrong. What has happened to our politics? I mean, I could talk forever. If anyone wants to book me for a lecture, by the way, on this, I'm up for it. I wouldn't even need a script. I could talk about this in terms of where our politics is now compared to where it used to be, how we view politicians, how we view our parties, our political appetites, what we sense as being important. We're way beyond the left versus right thing. We're in new territory. And many politicians, and I would suggest the Conservatives, but certainly the Labour Party, have simply not got their head around that. They don't realise what matters. And that really sums it up. Keir Starmer is leading this government. He's leading his party as if it was the kind of mid-90s. Nothing to see here. Just got to get along with it. Do what Tony Blair did. Everything will be cool. No, mate, you've completely misread the room. Things have changed. How long has he got left? 0344 499 1000. Leave us a voice note on there as well. Let's get a word on this and the other big stories of the day. Oscar Redrop back with us, former number 10 advisor to Boris Johnson. Oscar, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon.
Always good to see you. Let's start then with Mr. Starmer. Leadership collapsing under scandals, from backing Mandelson to losing key allies. Kemi Badenoch calling him out for being in hiding, while Labour MPs say his days are numbered. Let's have a listen to the Prime Minister. This is his most recent interview when he was asked about what he knew and when about Mandelson and his entourage, his friendship circle. Here's what he said.
Obviously, the diplomatic post of American ambassador, really important post, and Peter Mandelson, before he was appointed, went through a due diligence process. That's the propriety and ethics team, went through a process, and therefore I knew of his association with Epstein, but had I known then what I know now, I'd have never appointed him.
This is interesting, Oscar, isn't it? Because, I mean, we'll get on to the wider issue of, you know, how long can a Prime Minister survive under these kind of circumstances. But it just, there's something doesn't ring quite true about the Epstein response there. James Cleverly, you may have seen, did a wonderful tweet outlining what protocol and process looks like in the FCA, the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. And, you know, it's thorough. It's almost unthinkable they didn't know more than Keir Starmer is saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And look, I think, unfortunately, in terms of, we hear people talk about Starmer's lack of judgment on this issue. And I think he made the call, and maybe people around him made the call, that it was a risk worth taking, in that if you rewind back, the relationship with Trump was in some ways going to be quite defining. It could have been disastrously difficult for Keir Starmer and Number 10 and the Labour government if Trump's natural position which I think we all imagine it to be, to kind of slightly despise everything Keir Starmer stands for in a politician, without a real proper heavyweight operator like Peter Mandelson, that would have been exposed and all over our front pages, and, you know, relations with America down the toilet, all that kind of stuff. And in fairness, in the job itself, Mandelson's clearly done an exceptional job in those UK-US relations, and then by default, the relationship with Starmer. So I think it was a cataclysmic error of judgment from Starmer that would somehow work, or that Peter Mandelson was somehow the only person who could have delivered that. Yeah. Because I think this was always going to happen. And I think it probably was something that Number 10 were worried about. Day to day, they probably forget about it in the day-to-day of politics and all those live issues that we see day in, day out. But what it now results in, and, you know, being really objective, I remember this from the last days with Boris. We now have a government, and so you can go, you know, does Starmer last a week? Does he last till May? Does he last till Christmas? Whatever. The Starmer government is finished now, you know, in practice. And that is because we are now at a stage where Number 10, which is the epicenter, the driving force of government, is no longer able to deliver policy and its government's work. It is solely fighting a tailspin for its own survival at the moment. That building will be a viper's nest. There will be people who no one will trust each other. Authority lines will be all mixed up. There'll be paranoia. There will be people preparing their lifeboats, potentially, their own reputations. So for voters out there and listeners, if you think Number 10 today, or over the last couple of weeks, or moving forward are cracking on delivering on pledges and policy, they're just trying to survive.
Yeah. And it's interesting, I was saying a second ago, Oscar, that, you know, obviously, if it's a government that you didn't vote for, you always view them sort of through the prism of sort of some level of failure. I can't think of a single prime minister where people have said, oh, they're not going to survive this. I think it was famously, I don't know if it was John Major or David Cameron who stood up in the House of Commons on day one and Dennis Skinner shouted out, resign, sort of, you know, famous clip after he'd only been there 12 hours. So there's always going to be that appetite from people who don't naturally support you. But there genuinely does seem to be a momentum around this, and just over a year of being in office. That's curious.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's the if you zoom out a little bit, I think Number 10 and Starmer, when they got into power, they wrongly read, as you said in your you kind of alluded to in your opening gambit, the country. Well, they got the first bit right. The country was done with the Tory party kind of psychodrama and chaos every single day, and so they go right. I think the country went boring, kind of civil service government. Wrong. The country wanted delivery. There is an appetite out there for kind of radical thinking in order to deliver. And so Starmer is clearly unable to do that. So he is now just a vacuum. He is a nothing person. And I think that, of course, angers certain voters, but that angers Labour, angers people in the Labour Party. They've been waiting for power for, you know, nearly, you know, 2 decades, you know, and so he won a really good majority, and then he was just nothing. And so there's a lot of frustration in that Labour Party now that is absolutely coming out, you know, to the fore in just such quick fire pace. And that's because they feel let down. And actually, ultimately, and you know, there could have been a scenario where Starmer, he looked really weak yesterday with this defence, which again is slightly would anger people and frustrate people. He could have come out and said, you know, that ambassador role is one of the most important jobs in government. You know, the visit is next week. All the work that we've been doing with the US and the work we'll be delivering on moving forward. I just wanted to take a little bit of time and actually punch back a bit and go, you know, I've now come to that decision, but I needed to take a little bit of time. You can all just run off now. You know, like, I'm the Prime Minister, I'm in charge. And there's a weakness to him as well. And, you know, those sounding boards that have been so close to him, how successful they've been is up to you and your politics, I guess. But they're all now dropping like flies. And it's just, as I said, Could be May, could be next week, but in all but name, it's done.
And
it's
do you
done.
also, again, something I was saying just before we began speaking on this, Oscar, was the kind of sort of changing appetite of politics. We're no longer in this kind of socialism versus capitalism thing. It's much more layered, and people's desires and appetites, I sense at least, have somewhat changed. And Starmer, I think, you know, despite having these 14 years in opposition, kind of came in and almost thought he could just sort of be a bit like Tony Blair, even though he wasn't, but just kind of take off from that, but without really reading the room as to what's out there. You look at how reform feed into this discussion in an enormous way, the impact they have had and look like they're going to continue to have. Politics has changed, hasn't it? I mean, what people are looking for has changed.
Yeah, and he's not the right guy to kind of lead on that. I mean, I say this with no, you know, I mean, he's had an incredibly successful career. He's not a politico. He's not a political animal. He came into politics relatively late. And you have to be, and, you know, it's something I was quite struck by, you know, in my time in that building. You have to be a ferocious politico. You have to live it. You have to breathe it every second of the minute of your day.
Not go home at 6 o'clock on a Friday evening.
And I remember that. And like he's just not that. And I sometimes think he might even decide, you know what, I don't need this. I actually don't need this right now. And that's the contrast you have with Farage, right? Yeah. All that man is, like him all over him, all that man is a politico. And I don't mean that in a Westminster bubbly, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense, but he lives and breathes campaigning, politics, and what do the people want? What are the people saying? And Starmer's just not that guy. He's just not that guy. Yeah,
somebody described Farage to me recently as, you know, like those old boys that used to, often from kind of Irish construction lineage, who would come and, you know, tarmac roads and build roads all day long for about 12 hours, then go to the pub, have 12 pints, and always back at 5:30 the next morning. Never, ever letting you down. Always present. And he's kind of that, isn't he? He is that bloke.
He's a constant, immovable force, really. And I think Starmer's probably... I sometimes see him in interviews, and I saw it a little bit yesterday. I think he's probably a bit in shock, as into actually what is required to do this job at this moment in time. And look, we've seen it break other leaders, so it's not a huge slight on Starmer. He will be one of several others, but he's that rabbit in the headlights thing is really coming out. And the other thing that struck me is that, look, I didn't know, you know, and if I did know, then I would have, you know, hired him. Yeah. And it really taps in. And in some ways, it's just really quickly, it's the most striking thing about Starmer as Prime Minister for me. It really tapped in when he did that Island of Strangers speech. And then he said, actually, they weren't my words.
I didn't really mean it.
I didn't really mean it. I don't know what they meant. And I was just kind of like, yeah, mate, like this. No, that sums it all up in a way. 100%. Like you're not cut out for this. You're just not.
100%. Oscar, stay with us. Oscar Redrop is with us. Oscar was former senior advisor, of course, at Number 10 to Boris Johnson. Back with more from him in a few moments' time. We'll look at a number of things, including the one-in, one-out deportation flights. How did they go this morning? I think you already know. Details to come on that. And the latest to desert the Conservative Party and join Reform UK. Over to you as well, 0344 499 1000. How long has Keir Starmer got left? A serious question. Once upon a time, you could have asked that as kind of like very hypothetical. It doesn't seem like that now. It seems very real. Thoughts on that? Leave a voice note there as well. 1:20. This is Talk.
never wanted to carry a gun. I did carry a gun for a little while, but I didn't really want to do it routinely, and I didn't want my officers to carry it routinely because I never actually felt that that the risk was so great that they needed to do that. We, as you say, we've got highly trained officers in the UK. We can give them more training because there's fewer of them. But we're now in a situation where times have changed, and I think officers do feel unable to be able to protect themselves in serious situations.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
And the actor Robert Redford has died at the age of 89, we've just heard. Younger listeners, viewers, may not be massively familiar. Certainly way predates me as well, if that's possible. But I do know that this man was a legend of the silver screen. The Great Gatsby and Lord knows what else. Absolutely huge deal over there in Hollywood and around the world. Robert Redford, Hollywood actor and director, dies at 89. 0344 499 1000. Oscar Redrop is still with us, looking at the big stories of the day. This one's a beauty. It ties in, Oscar, to everything we've just been talking about. This is the UK-France deportation scheme, of course. Bit of a shambles, you might say, after the plane did take off. Hurrah! However, nobody was on it. Ooh, not meant to be like that. Exposing the failures of the one-in, one-out scheme. Legal challenges, you've guessed it, legal challenges stood in the way. Activist pressure blocking the process, and only a handful of migrants now face removal while thousands cross the channel. Let's have a reminder from the Prime Minister himself of what this groundbreaking deal was meant to achieve.
So I'm pleased to announce our agreement today on a groundbreaking returns pilot. For the very first time, migrants arriving via small boat will be detained and returned to France in short order. In exchange for every return, a different individual will be allowed to come here via a safe route, controlled and legal, subject to strict security checks, and only open to those who have not tried to enter the UK illegally.
Not going too well on day one, Oscar.
Oh, dear me. That's pretty... That's not aged well at all, is it?
Not at all.
Look, if it wasn't for all the other kind of, the other stuff going on, this would be the number one story, I think. Because, and in some ways, there's so much chaos and embarrassment going on with number 10 at the moment. Weirdly, this kind of falls down the pecking order. But look, I mean, this in some ways was entirely predictable. Hugely, hugely ironic that Starmer and the Labour Party were so adamant that Rwanda was merely a, silly waste of time gimmick, that they binned immediately when they entered government. When you look at what's happened today, in fairness, it speaks to the wider issue that unless you leave existing structures that prevent the grounding of these planes, this will happen time and time again. How that kind of, and in fairness, the Conservatives provided them with the poor example of, they had the benefit in a way that the Tories didn't.
Sure.
Like, they very much know that that's what happens. So for them to repeat the error, hugely embarrassing. And I think just to really, really kind of hammer it home, I believe the only person that was on the plane, who was invited to on the plane, was a Sun journalist. To to cover the empty seats in all their glory.
Thomas Godfrey was a journalist at The Sun who was
there. We go
there, and all he saw, there he is, was some empty seats. I mean, the optics of that, as well as the details, but the optics are horrendous for Keir Starmer.
Yeah. But look, I mean, and this is what, just linking back to what we were talking about before in terms of the government, in effect, only dealing with its own crises and, tail spinning and surviving basically each day. This won't, depressingly for your listeners and viewers, this won't even enter their thinking. This is, priority problem 6, 7, or 8.
Yeah.
And that's when I talk about a government, in terms of what we think a government is, which is something that enacts policies and drives home a narrative and a policy agenda. I mean, this isn't even on their agenda today. And this should be the absolute number one thing for both Number 10 and the new Home Secretary.
Yep.
It's beyond embarrassing.
Just a little. And a final one. We'll have to be brief on this if we can, Oscar, but former Health Minister Maria Caulfield's defection to Reform UK following Danny Kruger's shock exit yesterday. Big old blow to Kemi Badenoch, whatever she says. 13 ex-Tories now backing Nigel Farage. And, of course, Danny Kruger being a high-profile example of the first sitting Tory MP to do it. Let's have a listen to what Mr Kruger said about the Conservatives just yesterday.
The Conservative Party is over. Over as a national party, over as the principal opposition to the left. But I am not despondent, because conservatism is not over. It's never been needed more, and actually it's never been more vibrant. Because the failure of the Conservative Party has created space for an alternative.
What do you make of that, Oscar? I mean, as a Conservative, I assume your allegiance is still hanging on in there. But what do you make of this? I mean, your party was in power for 14 years, quite literally the most successful political party in Western democracy.
And it will be again, Ian. It will be again. Look,
you're hoping for the Canada moment. Is that what it is, Oscar?
Yeah. Look, I fully get it. I fully get the temptation. I fully appreciate and understand and admire the strengths of what Farage and the reform movement is doing. I entirely get it. What I would say, though, is that, and it was interesting, and my God, I would not even for 1 second attempt to lecture someone like, Mr. Kruger on conservatism and policy and politics generally. But what I would say that may sit a little bit awkwardly in time, and the clip you played, I think, highlighted this actually, is that conservatism not being dead, correct, I don't really see reform as particularly conservative. I mean, if you're like, they talk about big spending, state spending, a smaller state in some areas, perhaps than the Labour Party, but they're quite radical. And and depending on your politics, that's a great thing. I wouldn't see them as actually being particularly conservative. And I wonder in time, with a true small state conservative like Danny Kruger, if that may sit a little bit awkwardly. But I completely understand the temptation, and the Tory party is not in a good way. It really isn't.
It's never dull, though, which means that we can have many of these conversations and many more to come. Oscar, really appreciate your time and, of course, insight into these things as ever. He is, of course, Oscar Redrop, former advisor to Boris Johnson when he was Prime Minister. Thoughts on all of that? How long has Keir Starmer got left? Quite seriously. We'll speak to a couple of voices on this in a moment. It's your voices, however, that really matter to all of this. 0344 499 1000. Just a shade after 1:30. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
I love this angle from Trish, who says, a different angle for you, Ian. There is a solar eclipse on the 21st. In ancient times past, this would mean a leader will be gone. Eclipsed out, an ending. I study ancient astrology. He's not looking good. This is reference Keir Starmer. I love that, Trish. I would be intrigued to know if that could be evidenced by leaders falling while a solar eclipse takes place. Not absolutely sure that would be the case. 0344 499 1000. We are, of course, responding to. I mean, to say it's been a horrendous couple of weeks for Keir Starmer hardly touches the sides. Now, for many and his critics, it would go way beyond that, of course, way into other territory in terms of how bad things have got. There's all sorts in terms of the state of the economy, NHS, employment figures today, the list goes on. Some are describing it as Downing Street in chaos, the leadership crumbling, scandal after scandal, the Peter Mandelson explosive affair, those links to Epstein, losing key allies like Angela Rayner, his chief strategist just yesterday, and failing to justify those decisions as well. It's prompted the question fairly early in, Liz Truss, she lasted, 40-odd days. But generally speaking, when someone's delivered a landslide just over 12 months ago, you wouldn't expect these conversations. Let's speak with Colm Murphy, Senior Lecturer in British Politics, Queen Mary University, London. Colm, good afternoon to you. These are more than just kind of little snidey comments in the right-wing press. It seems to have almost exploded on Keir Starmer in the last couple of weeks.
Hi, Ian. I agree entirely that the tenor of the conversation within the governing party, the Labour Party, has changed in the last couple of weeks. Now, clearly that's because of the scandals, because of events did boy events, as Harold Macmillan famously said. But those have exposed more structural problems, right? So the strategy of Number 10 has been to try, at least in recent months, has been to try and set up a contest between Nigel Farage and Keir Starmer, and target certain swing voters on the reform end while hoping that their, what we would call a left block of voters, if that makes sense to you, is held. Now, that's a problematic strategy, given that voters are now much more volatile than they used to be, see the right, see reform challenging the Conservatives, and are not necessarily as loyal. And you mentioned the landslide just now, but you will also know that that landslide was based on a relatively low vote share. It was an efficient vote. So that was a structural problem, and you saw those tensions arise in how MPs responded to welfare cuts, which was driven, of course, by the economic policy problems as well, but also disquiet about the position on Gaza, and these kind of quite symbolic points for the left in Britain. And these scandals have blown that open, partly because, the departure of Rayner blew open the question of who might succeed Starmer. She was a favourite to succeed him, and inaugurated an internal leadership contest, and because Starmer's judgment has been called into question. So that then blows open all these other more structural and deeper questions, which is why we're now seeing more open discussion about Starmer's future.
I wonder whether, just looking at recent events, whether Starmer's option, if I was advising him, and I would be in no position to do so, Colm, other than being a bit of an anorak of this stuff, as I'm sure, despite your impressive qualifications, you are too. I would be saying to him, I think, probably go left. That, I think, is probably the only option available to him, isn't it?
Yeah, firstly, you're right that as a political scientist, like anoraks too, are just
there was no pejorative there, by the way.
Yeah. Yes, no, I think so, and I think they've clocked that. You've seen, for example, one could overread these things, but I do think it's telling that the initial response to the march in London on Saturday,
that was exactly what I was thinking.
Yeah, which many left found deeply distressing, was quite cautious. Peter Kyle on the Laura Kuenssberg show had a cautious response, but the language has hardened and hardened and hardened, and perhaps that was planned. I'm not sure it was, but even if it was, it shows that Number 10 clock what you just said. They realise that they're vulnerable on the left flank. Yeah. And I think it's right. I mean, the British Election Study have recently released some data from the summer about where Labour voters have gone. And Labour, on current voting intention, have lost more than half of the people who voted for them. And some have gone to Reform, but more have gone to the Greens and the Liberal Democrats. So geography does play a role here, and this is very early until the next election, so we should be careful with it. But nevertheless, there is a simple arithmetic here that if voters on your left are rebelling and there's more of them than on the right, then that at the very least gives you pause about the kind of current messaging and the current direction of your government.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking, if I was Keir Starmer, I'd probably rejoin the EU and stick the greatest wealth tax the Western world has ever seen onto rich old duffers, and maybe that would at least show some direction. And who knows, you know, he's in this kind of pincer movement, isn't he? You've got the Reform thing. And by the way, isn't it kind of interesting, we're not even talking about the Conservatives in this discussion, but he's got Reform, and then of course he's got the new Jeremy Corbyn party as well, gnawing away in the wings. So this could be really lethal for Keir Starmer. He's got to somehow really plant a flag.
Yeah, it's definitely a structural challenge. I would add to that long list you made also Zach Polanski's Greens.
Yes.
Because the Green Party, as you'll know, rebranded themselves as a left populist party, for lack of a better term. Yes, it is extremely challenging. I don't think it's inevitably insuperable, but it does require a recalculation. On policy, I mean, part of the problem here is the politics doesn't always match up with the policy. So we are in a fiscally constrained position. That does imply higher taxes. Taxes on wealth are popular within the left, but they might harm growth. Taxes on voters via their income taxes or VAT might solve your fiscal problem and might please the bond markets, but might be electorally toxic. If you instead go for cuts, you're pushing against your left flank. So to be fair, these are policy problems, but the skill of politics, the alchemy of politics, is to come up with a solution that binds together a coalition to those problems, and that's what the challenge facing Keir Starmer is.
Do you think, Colm, that politics has now changed? I was referencing this earlier, and certainly something I've thought about quite a lot is this, you know, it was always very simple. It was sort of left versus right, socialism versus capitalism. That's kind of gone, hasn't it? It's now a sort of multi-layered, almost hall of mirrors, kind of labyrinthine world of different appetites, changing appetites and expectations from the electorate. And I suppose Reform are, you know, evidence of that. Our previous guest who used to advise Boris Johnson was saying, you know, there's a couple of areas of reform that wouldn't sit incorrectly in a Labour manifesto, you know, things like nationalisation of certain parts of our infrastructure. So it's changed, and perhaps maybe it's changed for good.
It's a good question. I think it's a very good question because there's multiple answers. So I'm going to be a real academic here. Firstly, it is true that our party system is much more complex than it was even in like the late 20th century, and certainly from the post-war period when it was a real two-party system. There are still identifiable blocks of voters that are broadly left liberal and broadly right conservative, but they're neater, I think, on the cultural politics than the economic. You referenced Reform there. It is in the tradition of conservatism to be interventionist in the economy. It's only really since Thatcher that we think of conservatives as only small state. I mean, in Germany, Bismarck was a founder of the German version of the welfare state, and he was definitely a conservative. So, you know, if we have a longer time scale, that can be included within a conservative politics. So I think the answer to your question is the party system is very, very unstable and voters are very volatile. There are still identifiable blocks, but because of the voting system we have, it's currently extremely unclear where this is going to play out. So you asked about the Conservative Party. I honestly don't know. I mean, Badenoch has had a better week than recently because of the Mandelson issue. She was pretty good on PMQs there. But I really don't know what the future of the Conservatives is, because under first past the post, if you have like 6 parties all on a certain percentage of the vote, it only takes a couple of tweaks to have a radically different picture. So there are still identifiable blocks, but the party system is very, very unclear at the moment.
100%. Listen, Colm, great speaking. Let's speak again as well, because this story is absolutely developing almost by the day. Colm Murphy, Senior Lecturer in British Politics, Queen Mary University of London. Let's speak to Martin Abrams, Lambeth councillor and left-wing commentator. Martin, good afternoon to you. I saw somebody tweet earlier that if you saw somebody out in a balaclava trying to hide their face, that it used to be that you thought they were going to nick your phone. Now they're probably just a Labour supporter who doesn't want anybody to know. Is it that bad over there on the left at the moment?
Well, Ian, you might not know this. I was a member of the Labour Party for the best part of 20 years, but a couple of weeks ago I decided to resign from the Labour Party because things have got that bad in Labour now. Keir Starmer has basically said if you're on the left of the Labour Party and you don't like the direction the party is going in, then you can leave. And that's exactly what's happened, Ian. 200,000 plus members have left in a very short space of time. And, you know, that is a huge amount of money as well. Political parties depend on political money and donations for campaigning. That works out to be about, you know, between 15 and 20 million pounds a year in memberships, subs. So, and, you know, Keir Starmer's problems at the moment aren't a surprise, Ian. You know, if you cast your mind back, Keir Starmer was elected in 2015. He's only been an MP for 10 years. That is not a long time. And he's proved himself over and over again to be completely politically inept. You know, he was part of this 2016 chicken coup to try and undermine Jeremy Corbyn, where, you know, the right-wing Labour MPs pulled a coordinated stunt to resign to try and undermine Jeremy Corbyn. In 2017, Keir Starmer went completely off-piste in terms of policy making when he was shadow Brexit secretary and stood on a platform at the Labour Party conference saying that we should have you know, a referendum with Remain on the ballot. That wasn't Labour Party policy. He then lied through his teeth when he was standing to be leader. Every single one of his 10 pledges to the Labour Party membership he's basically torn up and thrown away. You know, popular policies like renationalising industries, renationalising our utilities. You've already mentioned about reform, you know, outflanking Labour on the left, you know, but his manifesto of 10 pledges was essentially, you know, a social democratic platform to take Labour in a direction that the Labour Party should be going in. Instead, what he's done is listen to people like Morgan McSweeney, his senior advisor, who has basically advised him to pander to the right, to pander to you know, the far right and people with you know, racist tendencies as well. You know, scapegoating, you know, vulnerable people like migrants and the like. It's a really toxic mix. And, you know, it really isn't surprising that after just over a year as Prime Minister, people are talking about him not being there.
Yeah, and you know, I would suggest as well, Martin, that this is, if you don't have a central direction, if you take Jeremy Corbyn, who I've always admired in the sense, I don't always agree with Jeremy Corbyn, but, you know, Jeremy Corbyn's been around since we were all kids and he's never changed. His position is consistent. He would have modified the odd thing here and there, but broadly speaking, you know what he stands for. He stood for 2 elections in recent years. He didn't waver on what he said. He didn't pretend he wasn't a socialist. He didn't pretend that he, you know, had some sort of appeasing element of his manifesto that was going to, the right wing were going to go, hey, we love you, Jeremy Corbyn, and all that business. He was, you know, pretty just absolutely solid down the line. Now, well, you know, I might not agree with him, but we're not North Korea. We have a democracy, and he was offering that choice. He also got a bigger share of the vote, of course, which doesn't get mentioned.
That's the thing,
often enough.
In politics, you either get politicians that are signposts and, you know, stick to their principles and show leadership and point in, you know, a direction that the public want to go in, or you get weather vanes that are basically constantly spinning on a sixpence, you know, trying to kind of go whichever the political weather of the day is.
They always lose as well,
ultimately. Is going towards. And Keir Starmer really has shown that he stands for nothing.
If he went more to the left, Martin, sorry to interject, but if he went more to the left, I said to Colm, our previous guest, is that what he should do? Should he just kind of suddenly pitch up and say, yeah, I'm going to hoover up? When he made those comments about the march on Saturday, I thought that was really interesting. I thought that was deliberate, that he kind of almost, he could have gone down the line and going, look, you know, there were some arrests, proportionately not many, but actually it was mostly just British people waving their flags and being proud to be British. But he didn't say that. It might have been politically expedient for him to say it, but he kind of went the other way. Is this, do you think, going to be a changing tone of this administration? They will try and recapture that left ground.
As Prime Minister, and he had to come out and say something about that march, OK? Let's be clear, OK? Not everyone on that march was far right, but there were certainly far-right elements within that march. Okay, you heard Elon Musk, the world's richest man, basically coming onto a big screen and inciting violence and talking about, dissolving the government. A prime minister that didn't say anything. I mean, it took him over 24 hours to come out and say something, which I think is far too long. But the prime minister that wouldn't have come out and said something about that.
I get that, but it was interesting that he didn't make great play of.
Very interesting. But
yeah, is that the direction of travel now, though, for Starmer?
Well, listen, I think that could be too little, too late. You've seen the emergence of leaders like Zach Polanski, and I'll let you into another bit of insight, Ian. I have decided to put my faith in Zach Polanski.
You've gone green, Martin. What happened to the boy from Lambeth? You've gone green.
Well, listen. I am a socialist. Okay, I want to see a huge shift of wealth in power to the most vulnerable. The one party that is standing up for that at the moment is the Green Party, and those 200,000 members that have left the Labour Party, the Green Party are getting about 1,000 members a week.
They are.
It's really important that you give a platform to those voices at the moment.
And that's why we're happy to have you on. Very briefly, Martin, we've got like 10 seconds. How long has Keir Starmer got left?
Well, I said, a few weeks ago that I think he'll probably go after the local elections in 2026. But it literally feels like day by day at the moment. You've got increasing briefings from people within his inner circle. People attacking his most senior advisor, Morgan McSweeney. I cannot see how this can go on because
spot on.
It's a rare opportunity to have a Labour government. The vast majority of governments in our lifetime, Ian, have been Conservative governments. And, it is a rare opportunity. The Labour government at the moment under Keir Starmer are absolutely blowing that opportunity.
There it is. Listen, Martin, thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. Candid response from him. He's a lefty. He's not going to apologise for it. That's why we spoke to him. Martin Abrams, Lambeth councillor and left-wing commentator, and now a supporter of the new Green Party. It raises the question, which we began with, how long has Keir Starmer got left? Your calls coming next.
I would disagree with probably everything else he said, but the horror of seeing, well, not just seeing, but knowing that he was killed for something he stood up for and believed in, I think is abhorrent. And I do hope, I gather Oxford at the moment are not thinking of taking action. I think it lowers the respect that many of us have of Oxford University if someone speaking in their name can have a voice.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Becca says, I bet Rayner is kicking herself buying that new apartment so early. She'd be sitting there loving this, knowing that Starmer is going soon, and she'd get the position she wanted, said Becca. Yeah, that was a kind of strange twist, isn't it, of the story as well. Keir Starmer, how long has he got left? Let's get a voice note from Sean in Grimsby.
I think the Prime Minister will drag it out, but I don't think he should. I think he should go. Look, if someone said to me, I want a job at your place, Sean, but my friend's a sex offender, then he won't be getting a job, right? Simple, right? This is normal to normal people. Yet to the Prime Minister, he has to wait for the process. It's like he needs somebody else to make his mind up for him. Like, he must know you can't hire people who have got friends of sex offenders. That's just nuts. Oh, great show, mate.
Thank you, Sean. Yeah, and then stuck with them even when you knew they were a sex offender. A child sex offender, we should say. Carl's in Liverpool on this very point. How long's he got left, Carl?
Oh, God, let's hope not long. But Ian, we spoke yesterday, and the Reform aren't ready for a general election. I don't, it'd be silly, but I think he'll hang in. But he has to go. He's had many scandals, but from the very first week, Ian, it's just got worse. There's no sign of it stopping whilst he's here. He's completely inept. He's certainly not politically capable, and he's definitely not. He
also doesn't look confident. Looks like I know it's the well-worn phrase "rabbit in a headlights." He looks a bit scared of where he is. He's out of his depth. There's no doubt about that. And I think more damningly, Carl, he's out of ideas.
Certainly, but also I think I think it took him a couple of weeks to understand and realise that he is completely out of his depth. But in that time, he's completely gone out of his way to destroy the country. But also, I think the person you had on before that was saying that Keir's planted to the right and, the far right and stuff. I don't get what he meant by that.
I think it was that. I mean, it was only one comment. Do you remember when he talked about... we're an island of strangers. Yeah. Which was a bit of a kind of nod to Enoch Powell. And then a couple of weeks later he went, somebody wrote that for me. It's not really my view.
Well, he's had
which was almost worse than not saying it in the first place, in a way.
Yeah, well, he's had plenty of them. I mean, Enoch Powell must be turning in his grave because he predicted,
But do you think if you were Keir Starmer, would you not do the very opposite and go kind of a bit more Jeremy Corbyn to offset both Corbyn and his new party and the Green Party and go, do you know what? We're not doing any deportation stuff. Immigrants are welcome. We're going to rejoin the EU. We're going to have a wealth tax, the likes of which will blow the pants off anyone who earns over about 120 grand a year. And we're going to go for it. Would that not be his best option as a left-winger?
I think he'd actually cause the biggest civil war.
Oh, no, there would be. But then the people that love that would vote for him and everybody else would vote for probably reform.
You would have the loony left out in their droves voting for that, and that would be the biggest problem if that was around the corner.
Indeed, but are there more votes? You know, bearing in mind Corbyn did better in terms of vote share when he stood than Starmer did, so maybe there's an appetite on that side. So it would be the ultra-left versus Reform. Carl, I've got to move because the news is upon us. Great call. Joanna says, how long has Starmer got? About to the end of your programme with the lion hypocrite with zero personality and stupid ideology. Not mixing the words there. More from you on the way right now. This is Talk. Let's get the news headlines. It's 2 o'clock.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Oh 0344 499 1000. Welcome back. It is the home of common sense, as we've been discussing. Downing Street in somewhat of a chaos at the moment. Starmer's leadership crumbling under scandal after scandal. That backing of Peter Mandelson, losing key allies like Angela Rayner, his chief strategist, had to walk the plank yesterday. The list goes on. Credibility in tatters. Reasonable question. I think is a reasonable question we should be asking. How long has Keir Starmer got left? More from you shortly. Also this afternoon, Donald Trump is arriving in the UK later this evening for his state visit. Apparently, word is, he's going to go easy on Keir Starmer, as of course the Prime Minister faces a lot of pressure over recent issues and things that are going on in his head at the moment. And as you heard, Robert Redford, the legendary actor and director, has died at 89, known for iconic roles in Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, All the President's Men. Redford passed away peacefully at home in Utah. He leaves behind a remarkable legacy, including 4 Oscars for his directing work. Lots to talk about there as well. Everything you need to know, all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. Andrew says, notice the way Sir Keir pronounces his P's. There's a brief explosion of air each time. He's literally puffed up, full of hot air. I haven't noticed. I'm not going to be able to unhear that when I see it next time. One in from Steve. I'm in no way surprised that those flights are not leaving. Does this debacle over the flights really show how we really need to get the hell out of the ECHR? These HR lawyers are obscene and crooked. What a disgusting joke this whole situation is. Please, someone help us. Do you know what, Steve? I kind of agree with a lot of what Steve just said there, but I would say I don't blame the lawyers. The lawyers act within the laws that are within this country. So they can operate within the template of our existing legal system. So I think the first point about getting the hell out of the ECHR would be the only way you could sufficiently and effectively deal with the problem. And, of course, another hammer blow today as well. It's not just, isn't it? I mean, this is just extraordinary terrain at the moment on the political landscape. Starmer's falling apart. So is Kemi Badenoch, albeit for different reasons. Or her party, absolutely, is another reasonably high profile, if you follow politics, switch from Tory to Reform. Maria Caulfield has defected. Now, she's a former health minister, no longer an MP, so not quite as high profile as Danny Kruger's shock departure yesterday. But it does mean that 13 ex-Tories are now rallying behind Nigel Farage. And it's worth a reminder of what Danny Kruger is a very moderate, much respected centrist conservative. He's kind of cut from the same cloth as David Cameron. So that's not everybody's cup of tea, certainly not in Reform. But it was interesting what he said yesterday about his former party. Have a listen.
The Conservative Party is over. Over as a national party. Over as the principal opposition to the left. But I am not despondent, because conservatism is not over. It's never been needed more, and actually it's never been more vibrant. Because the failure of the Conservative Party has created space for an alternative.
Let's get a word with Matthew Goodwin-Freeman on this. Matthew, good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian.
I mean, we know that Starmer's having an absolute mare at the moment, but there's not many parties going on over at Tory HQ either. This is a disaster.
I mean, it was completely unexpected, the news yesterday when Danny Kruger announced he was going to Reform. I watched that press conference live and then saw the video that they put out afterwards of him hiding behind a curtain, and then suddenly there he is. So I mean, look, yeah, it's a shock, it's a shame. It's the first Conservative MP to go across the benches since the general election last year, and no doubt there will be others having conversations as well.
Well, how does she claw this back? Because, I mean, they always wheel out the same line, Danny was a nice guy, but, this doesn't affect the inner mechanism of the Conservative Party. And spot what the inner mechanism is of the better. Optically and as a performer, I thought she will be better as a leader than Robert Jenrick was. I thought Robert Jenrick was perhaps the more conservative, but in terms of what you need to sell your party when you've just been absolutely hammered at an election, I thought a black female is for the Conservative Party will be, and I know it shouldn't just be about that, but I thought it would help the cause, and it seems to have done nothing, frankly, and it's turned out she's not even that good.
Well, I mean, Prime Minister's questions last week was absolutely brilliant from Kemi, but I want to see more of that. I want to see more 100%. Of that fiery Kemi holding the government to account. I mean, the Conservatives today have got this urgent question happening right now about Peter Mandelson's appointment. But you're right. I mean, the Conservative Party, we lost the election last year, absolute drubbing. And then the plan seems to have been to go away, come up with policies, go through this renewal, and then come back and announce them. But you just can't do that in politics. You can't be silent. We've left the opportunity for Reform to become the effective opposition whilst we're doing the work in Parliament. Now, I know a lot of MPs will say, well, that's the job. We've got to be in Parliament, holding the government to account, calling for debates. But out there in the public, if you ask people, they think Reform's the opposition already. So, you know, I hope that we get to party conference in the next couple of weeks. We see policies starting to come out. We see the direction of travel come out from the Conservative Party. And we really get running, because we cannot keep walking at this pace.
What do you think of the issue of MPs that cross the floor in this way? Because there's always that same debate, you know. Other detractors will go, there should be a by-election, which they never say when it's in their own advantage for these things, because it happens in different ways at different times for different parties, etc. Robert Buckland, of course, former senior cabinet minister with Boris Johnson, tweeted yesterday, hey, Danny Kruger, you're supposed to be my Conservative MP.
Yeah.
What on earth do you think you're doing? Local people did not vote for this.
I mean, the greatest test is at the ballot box at the end of the day. If individuals want to put themselves up for by-elections, they can. But let's not forget, by-elections cost money. So then that's a massive use of taxpayers' money to run an election where probably if you look at the polls, you can see what the result is going to be, or it will just be a protest at the government. So, you know, personally, we've never had it be that there's automatic by-elections when people switch sides. It's another cost that people would have to, you know, pay at the end of the day. And when everything else is so expensive right now, the last thing we need to do is be spending more taxpayers' money on by-elections.
One of the areas that's really fascinating me at the moment, Matthew, we've spoken to a couple of guests and touched on this, is the kind of changing face of politics and political appetites in terms of what we as voters want. It's no longer just a left and right thing. It's about something more than that. I know personality has never been more key. Instinctively, I'm a bit uncomfortable with that, but I also kind of get it when you look at the woeful, inept performances of some politicians, and then someone like Nigel Farage hits the stage. You think, yeah, now I can see where the attraction is.
Yeah, politics has completely changed. It is now no longer about left and right. It is more about common sense. It's more about what you can see and actually delivering. People are fed up of politicians making promises that they can't deliver, of all colours, of all parties, you know, and that's where politics is changing. And to give Kemi Badenoch a bit of credit, that is why she said, I want to come up with these policies and how they could be implemented instead of just, you know, announce them, because the last thing we want to do is say, right, we're going to do all these things and then go through, you know, the problems we had with Rwanda, for example, trying to get the Rwanda scheme off the ground, literally not able to do so because of the courts, blockages, having to change the law multiple times to get this through. You know, that's what we've got to stop seeing. We need to see government delivering. And at the moment, all we've got is, you know, chaos after chaos, crisis after crisis. I mean, I don't know how many more weeks we're going to be talking about Peter Mandelson.
Why has nobody else said that before? Unless they have. I love it.
There you go. You can have that one.
Thank you, Matthew. Great to talk. We'll talk again as well. Matthew Goodwin-Freeman, political commentator. Look, the reform thing is fascinating to anyone. To some, detractors will say that what Reform are experiencing is what Labour experienced at the last election, where it was anything but the Conservatives. And now it's anything but Labour. So Reform is, you know, perhaps for some, a natural area to gravitate to. Some people on the left, even in Starmer's party, I can't remember, how many was it they said they quit? Was it 200,000 or something had quit the Labour Party? Did our first guest mention, or our second guest refer to? It's seismic numbers. And many of those would have gone to the Green Party and some to the Lib Dems, etc. I don't quite know why you go to the Lib Dems. I'm sure they have their own reasons for it. It's peculiar, but hey, the human condition is a bit peculiar. But Reform's certainly the chief incumbents. How much of that is down to Nigel Farage and the seductive nature of Nigel, but also down to the fact that, well, we've tried the Tories, we've tried Labour, let's give them a go? And how much is it down to a real philosophical link to what Reform stand for? Because we have, you know, more information than we've ever had about Reform, but there's still some big old gaps in the workbook, isn't there? There's still some areas, you know, NHS policy that needs to be really thrashed out. I'm pretty sure in the next 6 months we will get a seismic announcement on that. So it needs that, and they are filling in these gaps. But at the moment, the attraction is, for you, what? Is it the personality? Is it the specifics of the party, or is it because they are none of the above? Let's go to James down in London on Keir Starmer. What do you reckon, James? How long has he got left?
Well, Ian, hopefully not long. But Ian, what doesn't sit right with me is we've got a UK Prime Minister that ignored his own security services briefing that told him that Mandelson was a problem to be appointed, and we had a British Prime Minister who ignored what they said and went ahead and appointed this man.
Yeah.
And what makes me laugh is the Prime Minister is turning around and saying he's lying to the nation, he's lying to Parliament, he's lying to everybody, because he's saying that he did not know specifically why he shouldn't appoint him. Our security services are sitting down with our Prime Minister, and you're telling me they're not going through details. This is a man, by the way, Ian, that is a detail-driven man. So if the security services said, why not, our British Prime Minister didn't ask. Yes, he did ask. He was well aware of what was going on, but he didn't expect emails to be leaked from Congress, and also Mandy Mandelson cutting his own throat on that podcast.
Do you sense then that, I mean, you're right about the podcast, do you sense that Starmer can, on this particular point about Mandelson, because his position is, yeah, I knew he used to be a friend of his, I didn't know that he still was at this time. Is that believable to you?
No, it's not, because our security services would be aware of a former EU trade commissioner and our business secretary going into New York and being aware of where he stayed. He stayed at Jeffrey Epstein's apartments while this man was in jail for paedophilia. And our security services would be well aware that where he was staying for security purposes, and our Prime Minister is fully aware where Mr. Mandelson was staying. But he thought that this would never come out.
But Starmer wouldn't have been, I mean, when it happened some years ago.
Ian.
He wasn't the Prime Minister when
he was when that brief was given to him, and that brief.
He wasn't the Prime Minister when Mandelson stayed at Epstein's house.
But he was Prime Minister when our security services sat down with him in Downing Street and gave him an in-depth reason why Mandelson should not be appointed.
But apparently they did. Apparently, yeah, I know, I agree with you. But Starmer's position is he wasn't aware of that. That wasn't said at the time.
No.
It only came out afterwards.
He had detail given to him. Why? Because they just don't say we don't think he should be there. These are the reasons why we think that Mr. Mandelson is a security risk. He could be blackmailable on these grounds. And the British Prime Minister ignored that advice, appointed him because he's a Labour grandee and because he was a trade commissioner and our business secretary, and he had good connections in the United States.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, this is why he ignored that advice. Our Prime Minister, you lied to us, you lied to the nation, you ignored security advice, you should resign now. On
that point alone, yeah, many people making exactly that same, which I think is an increasingly strong point. James, thank you for that. Great call. Margaret says, Starmer hopefully gone by Christmas, but I think definitely after May 2026. But he is stubborn and will go nowhere. It is, I think the general response, unless the stress is so great that you think this is horrendous. I wake up in the morning and I have nothing, there's no kind of sense of optimism in the job. And I don't know who to trust around me, which again, Thatcher found that out, but she found it out about sort of 3 weeks before she left office, having been there for 11 years. He's been there for just over 11 months. I mean, man alive, this is all happening rather quickly. This one from Dan in Staffordshire, who says, I just heard that a British soldier has been charged with murder in Kenya and is to be deported to stand trial, and rightly so. So why, if an illegal commits offences in Britain, why don't we deport them? And if so, if we do, it's a rare moment. Well, I suppose, depending on the issue, the court case, I mean, if somebody in this country, if a migrant in this country commits a terrible crime, they would have to stand trial in this country, wouldn't they? because all the witnesses would also be. You couldn't send the witnesses over to, if it was in reverse, Kenya. But just for context on this, this is the story that an arrest warrant has been issued by a Kenyan High Court for a former British soldier in connection with the murder of a 21-year-old mother back in 2012. Agnes Winjuri was found dead in a hotel septic tank in her hometown in Kenya, which is close to the British Army training unit in Kenya. In 2018, an inquest concluded that she was murdered by one or more British soldiers based in the area. The judge said there was sufficient evidence to compel the UK citizen to appear before the court on a charge of murder. So that would be to compel him to go out to Kenya. I think that was the point that Dan was trying to make, that we could compel people to come back. I don't know, maybe I'm just slightly confused on that. But anyway, Dan, thank you very much indeed. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
Of people there, and they would have been there for their own reasons. And I think it's very unfair to caricature the Unite the Kingdom rally as some kind of far-right march. But I have to say, some of the selection of speakers was somewhat questionable. Now, irrespective of your views of Elon Musk, I'm not sure if he is the right person in terms of providing us with advice to unite the kingdom, considering in last summer's violent disorder, he talked about how civil war is inevitable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Always plug your microphone in. Only made that error 7 times now. It is Talk, 0344 499 1000. One in from Andy. I can understand the concern of ex-Tories joining Reform, but then a lot of Reform members are ex-Tories. Well, that's true. I mean, ultimately, pretty much all of reform was based on ex-Tories who were disgruntled and set the whole thing up themselves. It's believing in delivering the policies that is the important thing. MPs will always come and go. Let them, says Andy in Cornwall. What does it matter for the Tory party, I wonder? In terms of, well, Kemi Badenoch's not going to be best happy about it, is she? I mean, these are troubling times for her as it is. And now we are, in theory, 4 years away from an election. And a party that currently has, 5 MPs, one's a defector, are chalked in to win the next election, a significant win at the next election. I say this a couple of times a week. It's beyond extraordinary, which shows you that there is a real thirst for change in this country. Jules is in Bedford. How long's he got, Jules? Afternoon to you.
Well, I don't know. Check your watch. Not long.
Well, it's 25 past 2 now, so let's see.
But joking apart, poor old Starmer, he's really painted himself into a corner in a way that I don't think is being talked about enough. So his manifesto commitment, which he restated recently, to give votes to 16 and 17-year-olds. Put yourself in the mind of a 16 and a 17-year-old, Ian. Who are you going to vote for? Yeah. Chances are you're going to go vote Green, because that's what the BBC and your teachers will tell you to do. Or you're going to vote for Corbyn to wind up your parents. It's going to be one of the two. You're not going to be voting for Keir, are you?
I wouldn't have thought so. That's a good point. Yeah.
So is he going to go through with that and basically create 2 million voters for other people?
But that's why I wonder whether his option is to go more left, to go back to... this is a man that campaigned for Jeremy Corbyn to be Prime Minister.
Yeah. I agree. I think that's got to be an option. But, of course, the thing is that if he takes it, we all know what the result will be, which is even faster economic collapse.
Yeah.
But yeah, sure, it's an option.
Yeah.
And the thing is, it almost seems to me, and I'm just about old enough to remember the Labour government of the 1970s, once in a generation or two, you just have to have a proper left-wing Labour government to remind everybody where you don't want a proper left-wing Labour government.
Yeah, well, that's very true. It was said, though, by many after Corbyn lost, that I can't remember who said it. I was trying to think this the other day, Jules, but it was somebody said something like Corbyn lost not because he was too left-wing, but because he wasn't left-wing enough.
Yeah, I don't buy that. I think we'll find out with the Fruit and Nut Party just what the appetite is for the real left-wingers.
Yeah.
Them plus the Greens. They're going to pick up some seats. I think they'll do quite well. Together, they may have more MPs than Labour after the next election. That'd be hilarious, wouldn't it?
Just a bit, wouldn't it? That would be incredible. So you're going to have this... So you've got Jeremy Corbyn would be the official opposition to reform.
No, I think the Liberal Democrats. I think they'll hoover up. I think they'll hoover up. So you're really going to have the 4 parties, aren't you? Apart from the sort of the nationalists.
Yeah.
But you're going to have the Lib Dems, Labour, Fruit and Nut, and the Greens, and that'll be one block, and it'll be Tories and Reform, the other block.
Got
Crazy
it.
Stuff.
Wow. I mean, it's not dull, is it? I mean, it's exciting stuff. It gives people like us, and I include yourself in that, Jules, those that are interested, enough conversation. There's never going to be a dull moment in a pub over a pint again. Jules, thank you very much indeed for that. Matt's in Cheshire. How you doing, Matt?
Hi, good afternoon, Ian.
Afternoon. What are you thinking?
When I rang originally, I said before Christmas, but I've just watched about 20 minutes of the 3-hour debate, and basically it should be called the slag the pathetic politician 3-hour session off, because Stephen Flynn's just give a speech, leader of the SNP, and he just absolutely savaged Starmer, and I completely forgot that all the other parties will pounce on Labour's total and utter patheticness. I forgot about the SNP. I forgot about Ed Davey. Reform don't even have to do anything. They can just sit back and let them do all the work.
Is that good or bad? Because there's, it's not very satisfactory, and some would say it's even dangerous if you win because you're not the other guy.
Reform have already set out their agenda. Everybody knows what Reform are about now. People have known that for 20 years, since Nigel Farage was in the public sphere. There's nothing new about what Nigel Farage is saying. All he's doing is adding to the reasons people are attracted to Reform. You've got Zia Youssef, Lee Anderson. You've got Daniel Kruger, a smart, intelligent, one of the best Tory MPs that were left, I would say.
Yeah.
And it's literally, I'm going to say, maybe 3 or 4 weeks he'll be gone now.
Wow.
They're sat there, all the Labour MPs. Yeah. They just look like they're depressed. They've got no fight left in them.
It's the speed, Matt, isn't it? The speed this has happened at. There was never any honeymoon for Starmer, of course, because he came in with, a couple of policies. He did the VAT on private school thing. He did the winter fuel allowance. He did the farmers. And within half an hour, this bloke was public enemy number one. He'd upset everybody from the left to the right.
Do you remember numerous occasions, Ian, we talked about nobody had ever overturned a majority of this size in 300 years?
Yeah.
And it happened. We're going to see a 4...
Are you talking about Boris Johnson?
Yeah. We said, this can't happen. Nobody's ever overturned.
Yeah, it was ridiculous that Boris Johnson, because he was penciled in to be Prime Minister for 2 terms, right? Because no one could overturn an 80-odd majority.
And this is now going to be the same as that. I'm going to say 450 to 475 Reform seats.
Wow.
45% of this vote share. And it's just going to be an absolute massacre. Everybody's waiting for it. We're just sat twiddling our thumbs now, just thinking, come on. We're just waiting for the means to get to the general election now.
It's not going to go on till it's not going to be 2029, is it? It's really not. I mean, I didn't buy into any of that until quite recently, because I thought, annoying as it is, politicians have a habit of clinging on. But when you lose the support from your own party, that's when the real rot sets in. The Tories or Reform having a pop at Starmer, or me and you having a pop at Starmer, is no news at all for Starmer. But when he starts to lose his own deputy, his own ambassador, his own chief strategist in 10 days, and this could be just the beginning, and then you get people on the sidelines telling you off the record, and we had it today, Matt, trying to book, some voices on Starmer saying, no, we quietly off the record don't support him. And these are left-wingers.
Well, my last comment will be, who's left in of any talent, of any note? Who's left? And please don't say Andy Burnham, because I'm sure Reform could destroy Andy Burnham with a few YouTube videos in central Manchester. He is literally he is Sadiq Khan. He is turning Manchester into a utopian, drug-fueled, lunatic-fueled, illegal immigrant-fueled hellhole. So this idea that he's the saviour is... he'll just...
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. There's this kind of like Andy Burnham sort of dining out on this sort of rather invented record of brilliance, which is just simply doesn't stand up to any level of scrutiny. Listen, Matt, got to move. Great call as ever. Thank you for that. I don't know. Do you know who, for the Labour Party, the best person to replace Keir Starmer would be Jeremy Corbyn? I'm going to come back to that every day of the week. If you're a Labour supporter, your best chance at the next election is Jeremy Corbyn. Remember, Jeremy Corbyn got close to being the Prime Minister. And mad as that sounds, I mean, there'll be some lefties who will run for the hills. And, of course, he's got this Polanski character in the Green Party to kind of jiggle with or juggle with, or maybe both. 0344 499 1000. Great calls on this. Loads of messages as well. We'll come to more of those in a couple of moments' time. 2:30. This is Talk.
across the UK.
Now, the Unite the Kingdom march saw at least 150,000 patriots with just 25 arrests. Now, we've talked about that headline a number of times. I know there's arguments about how many people attended, and look, I said it yesterday, whatever the number is, it's a shed load of people. It's huge, it's massive. Don't in any way think, if you hear, I mean, there's been a couple of mischievous media outlets going 90,000, 100,000. Even the BBC said above 150,000. Notting Hill Carnival racked up 423 arrests, 4 times the rate per attendee. Yet Sadiq Khan's response on X showed a stark double standard, treating the patriotic rally far more harshly than the carnival ones. He said, my thanks go to all police officers, all the officers policing protests today. Most protesters were peaceful, but a number of officers were assaulted and arrests have been made. Violence and attacking police officers is completely unacceptable. I don't think he's ever said anything like that about the Notting Hill Carnival. Let's speak to a man who knows all about policing, over 30 years in the job, Norman Brennan, former cop. Afternoon to you, Norman.
Yeah, good afternoon, Ian.
I mean, this was a kind of classic case. I think this point of arrests and proportion of arrests is hugely relevant here, and yet it was ignored by the Prime Minister, and now it's ignored by the Mayor of London, and he's the Police and Crime Commissioner for London.
Yeah, Ian, correct. Can I just correct the figures about Notting Hill Carnival?
Yes.
Although there was 423, the Met made a number of preemptive arrests prior to the month, right? And out of those arrests, of 100, 11 firearms were seized and 40 knives. Wow. So that prevented potential serious disorder. And also, Ian, what's interesting and should be put forward is on Family Day at Carnival, 187 arrests took place. So it's in a wildly different set of numbers, right? Even per attendee, it's much higher than what happened to the protests on Saturday. So why do we see politicians almost ignoring one and making a song and dance about the other? I would suggest probably because Unite the Kingdom demonstration and rally was organised by one Tommy Robertson. And because Tommy is quite well known for his outspoken views and he has a checkered history, but many of us have checkered histories, that doesn't mean we can't give a view. Anyway, just to let you know, I attended the rally on Saturday in London, and I did it for a purpose of being independent, because I'm normally speaking to people like you, Ian, after the event when I've been sitting at home having a cup of coffee and a sausage sandwich. So I spent 5 hours there myself. And I'll tell you what, I'm an independent spokesperson, as you know, on policing and also on victims of crime, and I advise the public on the law. So I was one of the most independent people there. Ian, I enjoyed the day. Yeah. There were lots of people, northeast, well, southwest, spoke funny languages, lovely languages. They were friendly. And unlike the opposing group that were there, and about 5,000, instead of wearing masks, I didn't see one. I just saw smiles and people there that were fed up with what they see in this country. Illegal migration, being told what to think, say or do, and believing that we're having taken away the country that we grew up and loved. We don't recognise it anymore, and that was the other reason I attended. And these were not far-right people. They were absolutely just decent, law-abiding members of the public that wanted to join comrades with the same views as themselves. And I would imagine that the head of the Met, and certainly the various senior officers that were involved in organising the police response to a march this size, I would imagine that the conversation back in the tea room at Scotland Yard or Charing Cross or whatever cop shop it was would have been, well, that went rather well. I can't imagine the police would have had any other opinion. To get 25 arrests or whatever it was after a protest that big would have been seen in policing terms, Norman, I would have thought, as a result. Well, I walked there deliberately with another retired firearms officer, a chap called Harry Tanguy. And the pair of us, Harry's great. The pair of us went there for independent viewing, and we walked and we met dozens, if not hundreds, of people. The first two people that we met, Ian, were two public order police officers. Both of them knew who Harry and I were, thanked us for speaking up for them. We shook hands and we all wished each other a good day. That's exactly what we did. Now, at every demonstration, there are always flashpoints where idiots that are probably high on drugs or drink or went along for alternative motives to cause trouble did exactly that. I understand that two groups, the opposing group and the Unite the Kingdom group, came face to face at one point. A bottle was thrown and there was some issues. It's absolutely unacceptable for police officers to be assaulted. I'm one of their lead champions on protection, so it's absolutely right I say that. However, let's put it into perspective. For 5 hours when I was at the demonstration, Ian, I didn't see a single person that acted disorderly. I didn't see anybody that wanted any trouble. They were polite. We often bumped into each other. And do you know what? People were saying, sorry, you go first. I've never seen so many polite people at a rally, contrary to where I policed Notting Hill, both as a uniformed officer and as a detective. I can tell you now, I would much prefer to have been at the United Kingdom rally on Saturday, where I saw lovely people, non-violent, non-aggressive, than when I actually policed Notting Hill Carnival as a police officer.
And that is incredibly telling. Listen, Norman, thank you for your time as ever. Norman Brennan, that's strong stuff and evidenced by his own attendance there on Saturday. I don't know why that... I mean, even by Keir Starmer's odd standards, and again, is it political that he was deciding deliberately, you know, our flag will not be hijacked? Hijacked by who? What, other British people? We will not allow the flag to... I mean, it's such high-octane cobblers when he came out with that sentence. I mean, it really makes no sense. And unless you're just insulting British people, it will not be hijacked by... I mean, just look at the crowd. Of course, look, with any kind of protest that you do on this kind of stuff, if CND had a protest tomorrow, it would be most... Do they still exist, CND? Campaign for Nuclear Disarmament? I'm sure they do. If CND had a protest tomorrow, then the average person that would turn up would be a very peaceful... I'm thinking of the sort of elderly lady thing, because remember there was the whole CND... I don't know what it was called, but sort of Women for CND or something like that. It was a little bit sort of hippie-centred, but there was a big thing made about a lot of females protesting at the time. A lot of old ladies, you know, knitting and sitting there in their deck chairs protesting. So if CND had a protest tomorrow, it would mostly be full of very peaceful people who would just be there because they philosophically believe that nuclear weapons have no place in the modern world. As a democracy, you are allowed to have that position. It's called free speech. That's fine. However, what there would be a contingent of fairly ferocious left-wingers who will always gravitate to a protest like that. And if you do that on the other side, if you have Unite the Kingdom, you are going to get 98, 99% of people who are just ordinary people who've turned up because, and as we said yesterday, there was a spectrum of reasons why people attended that march. For some people, it was about free speech. For others, it was about immigration. For some, it was a mixture of everything. For others, it was just a celebration of going, it's not very often you can get together with patriotic Brits and fly a flag and just enjoy the day. So, variety of reasons. There would have been, within that, a small percentage, probably not even 1%, of nut jobs. Of course there are. We see it with every single riot, whether it's left-wing or right-wing nut jobs. They will always turn up in numbers, always turn up. It's almost like somebody rents them on either side of the spectrum. But they will always show up for a bit of a scrap. So if you said, yeah, were there right-wing nutters there? Probably, or were they just nutters for that matter? Does that in any way... You know, if you wrote this in a dissertation for university and said, I'm going to write a dissertation about the right-wing nutty riots that took place, or the protests that took place on Saturday, the, what was it, 15th, 13th of September, Saturday the 13th of September, then you'd be kicked out of university because your professor would go, but what you've just written is not true, because they were not rabid right-wing protests. They were just people, OK, of all different backgrounds. So you've just written something that's not true. But that's what our Prime Minister has kind of done. It's what Sadiq Khan has done. Not even acknowledging that there were so few arrests by comparison and as a proportion of numbers. So even if you took the lowest number of 150,000, it's still 25 people out of 150,000. That's probably fewer than get arrested at a football match on a Saturday. Per match, by the way. Joan's in Sunderland on Keir Starmer. What have you got for us, Joan? Afternoon to you.
Oh, well, I see Keir Starmer's one in, one out scheme is scuppered already.
Yeah, it's not going well, is it?
Absolutely useless, this bloke is. He cares nothing for this country. All he's interested in, everybody else is more important than us. And I believe our country is slowly being given away bit by bit. This guy has form. If you think about what he did to the Chudosians, I mean, were they asked if they wanted their country to be given away to Mauritius?
Yeah, that's a good point.
And as I say, not only that, it was given away and then they must have realised, oh, there's a military base there. We'll rent it back, costing us shed loads of money. This man and his government are absolutely ridiculous. And I'll tell you now, there's two more things coming down the line. Our Rich on the 26th of November with our budget. And then we've taken our eyes off the ball with the mad professor, that energy bloke.
Yeah.
And I believe there's things going on in that department that we know nothing about. There'll be all kinds getting signed off. And this whole crew, the lot of them, are absolutely useless. I've seen nothing like it in my life. But Churchill wrote, history will be kind to me. I wonder what it writes about Starmer. And then you asked about a time limit. Wasn't it Shakespeare who said, beware the Ides of March?
Profound stuff. Joan, I like it. Thank you very much indeed. That is Joan in Sunderland, should that be, rather than Sutherland. Joan in Sunderland. Thank you, Joan. Great call. 0344 499 1000. Lots of comment coming through from you. We're going to do more of that in a couple of times. Sue Endorse says, are you thinking of the Greenham Common? Well, yes, the Greenham Common women, says Sue Endorse. My partner used to live in that area. They sort of surrounded Greenham Common, which I think is where US nuclear capability was being housed or transported to, or something of that nature. That's exactly who it was. Thank you, Sue, for that. Back with more from you coming next on Talk.
variety of people there, and they would have been there for their own reasons. And I think it's very unfair to caricature the Unite the Kingdom rally as some kind of far-right march. But I have to say, some of the selection of speakers was somewhat questionable. Now, irrespective of your views of Elon Musk, I'm not sure if he is the right person in terms of providing us with advice to unite the kingdom, considering in last summer's violent disorder, he talked about how civil war is inevitable.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This comes from Chris, who's a former police officer who was also there on Saturday at the protest. He said, I've also policed... In fact, we had a police officer yesterday who tweeted or posted same thing, who was also at the protest. I would put the number of attendees at about 200,000. Believe me, the last people who can hazard a guess are those who are there. You can have no idea when you're on the ground whether it's 100,000 or 100 million. It's just a wash of people. It went off completely peacefully. The police response was brilliant, and the disproportionate number of arrests was impressive, says Chris. But I also got this as well from Quinn in Rotherhithe. It says, this is at least the fourth time I've tried to get across to your station. Please stop repeating this totally wrong number at the demo on Saturday. It does matter. I was there. It was more like 2 million present. Quinn, I promise you, there would not have been 2 million in terms of simply the... So the police work out the response on roughly how many cops per X amount of metres it takes to police an event and the length of roads that are allowed to be avenues for protest. Obviously, there's some splinter roads as well. Then they take aerial footage, so it's always a best guess on anyone's part. There was no big spike on roads. There was no big spike on trains beyond train journeys, beyond, as you would see, and I'm quoting from one train company, on a normal day when people are going to see an away football match. That doesn't in any way underplay anything. I'm likely to agree with Chris, the former cop, who was also proudly there as well, and say that it was probably more like 200,000. All I know is that every time there's a protest, people argue about the numbers. It was this amount, it was that amount. What made this one different, I think, and everyone always accuses the police of getting it wrong, and then they multiply it by 10, 20 or 1,000, whatever it was. What marks, I think, marks Saturday out is the amount of people who attended virtually. And I think there's been some confusion over that, because this was online for people to see. And that was a bit of a game changer. And I don't discount the people that were online looking, even if you park the fact that some journalists would have been looking in, or just the odd person who hasn't got an interest had a look. Most people who would have been online to follow it were online because they believed in what was happening. And I would happily count those people in a similar way. They weren't physically there, but I think the fact you bothered to log in and watch also counts. One thing we can all agree on, there was a shed load of people there, and it was massive. Don't anyone underplay it, whatever the numbers. Very quickly, before we go to the phones, we've got the voice of doom, of course. This is the political mystery voice. It's day 3. No one's got it right so far. Very simply, you've just got to identify who is this.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
Who do you think that is? Here it is again.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
And I think we can hear it again.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
If you think you know, 87222, don't call, just message. If we get a right answer, we'll tell you after the news. One more time.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
Who's that then? Remember, you're looking for a politician, past or present. Back to the phones. Phil's in Hertfordshire. What have you got for us, Phil? Afternoon to you.
Good afternoon, Ian. Yeah, we've been talking about Starmer, haven't we, for the past sort of hour or so. I just wondered, when he's sitting in the Arsenal stadium,
yep,
and there's 60,000 people there, what do you think he sees?
It's a great point.
Does he see the lady that can't afford to pay her electric bill because she's got to feed her kids? Does he see them poor old pensioners that can't afford to pay their electric bill or their fuel bill or can't even afford to eat?
Yeah.
Does he see the couple with a family that's struggling to pay their mortgage? He sees none of that. He's out of touch.
What do you think? What do you think puts him out of touch? I mean, if you look at the background of different politicians, Boris Johnson came from a pretty good background. David Cameron definitely came from a good background. Theresa May, bit more middle class, fairly ordinary, daughter of a vicar, but a goodish background. And Starmer, was probably the nearer to being. It wasn't quite a working class boy, but he was nearer to it than many of the predecessors. So why does he... You'd think he, of all people, would see it more than some of the others?
Yeah, Ian, I believe there's a few things at play here. Ego.
Yep.
That's one of them. And his desire to be an elite. Now, we've all heard it, haven't we, when he was asked where he would rather be, Davos or in Parliament, and he said Davos. And this is what he sees.
Was he not trying to... I often wonder about that statement. Do you think he was trying to be cool by going, I don't mix with that lot at Westminster, without even really kind of understanding the implications of what Davos was to many people?
No, I don't think he does, Ian, because he looks at the electorate as minions, which is cash cows and minions. He doesn't see us as actually human beings. We're products. And we can be manipulated and we can be squeezed. And that's what he's doing to us. Can you tell me one thing that he's actually done for anybody that's actually going to benefit people? I can't.
That's a good point.
I really can't think of anything. And it's not just him. It's most of these politicians. They are out of touch.
Yeah.
And this is where reforming and they're a little bit different. Maybe their politics is going to be different. Maybe like I think it was one of your commentators said they're not conservative. Maybe he's right. Maybe there's a new word that we need to find for reform. And it's a new way of thought. It's a new way of thinking. It's what people want. They want to be recognised. Now, with Nigel Farage, he'll go down the pub. He'll mix with normal people.
Yeah.
He's actually he's on the level and he understands. And do you remember when Starmer got battered in the elections a few months back? And what did he say? I get it. No, you don't.
No,
and
you don't.
will.
And that's the thing. But I wonder whether... I mean, I kind of tend to agree with most of what you've said there, Phil. But I also think there's another thing at play, and that is just his... I think he came in thinking all he had to do was not be the Conservatives, and all he had to do was a little bit sort of blairy. I've been a top lawyer, so I've had a very, very high-profile job as running the Director of Public Prosecutions. So I can do this. But what was missing, Phil, was a political ideology, right? A philosophy.
Absolutely. But then that goes to prove here, Ian, how out of touch he is.
Yeah.
His ideology is wrong. You've got Lee Anderson, you've got Richard Tice, you've got Nigel Farage. They are in touch with people.
They're in touch and they have a kind of focus. They have an antenna, a radar, all of those things. He's bereft of all of that. Phil, I've got to move because the news is coming on. You've been fabulous. That was Phil in Hertfordshire. Really good points on that. I genuinely think that's the problem we have with this guy. There's no core, no central core. His political DNA is still hooked up with, a bit of a lefty, but not much of one. You know what I mean. Here's the voice of doom.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
Who's that? Details and more of your calls coming up on the other side of the news at 3, which is next.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. 0344 499 1000. We're talking about Keir Starmer. He's up to his flipping neck in it, isn't it? All sorts of crumbling going on around his leadership. Scandal after scandal. The Peter Mandelson affair. Losing Angela Rayner, his chief strategist. Just yesterday, his credibility appears to be in tatter. Serious question. How long has Keir Starmer got left? We'll have more on that from you coming up. Plus, the UK-France deportation scheme is failing as the second flight left empty. Yep, it was legal challenges that stood in the way, blocking Keir Starmer's one-in, one-out plan. Thousands, of course, continue to cross the channel. We'll talk about that next. And Donald Trump is arriving in the UK later for his state visit. The US president is expected to go easy on Sir Keir despite the world crumbling around him. We'll watch with interest as to how that all pans out. All of that and more coming up. And, of course, we bring you all the breaking news right here on Talk. 0344 499 1000. 3 minutes after 3 o'clock. Before we go back to some more Keir Starmer comments, we should, of course, focus on the fact as well that the UK is preparing for the arrival of President Trump, his second state visit. It's been reported that Trump has plans to let Starmer off lightly and avoid any sort of political confrontation. President Trump set to arrive tonight and will kick off his two-day stay in which he'll meet King Charles and Keir Starmer. Let's speak on this first to Laurie Laird, US political commentator. Laurie, good afternoon to you.
Yeah, nice to see you.
And you too. We understand it's quite difficult to work out. We think the president has taken off, although there's some images showing him just getting on a plane. But I'm sure we saw some imaging of Air Force One taking off. Planning to avoid a confrontation. I suppose this is a state visit. I mean, these kind of things are quite nicey affairs, aren't they? They're all about sort of expensive cutlery and banquets and nice cars and walking
and
past
royalty.
lots of royalty, walking past lots of soldiers and for saluting, all of that stuff. He's going to have a whale of a time, isn't he?
Listen, I hope so, but I hope he gets some sleep on the plane, because I was just looking at his comments before he got on Marine One, and we're both looking at that image of Marine One on the White House lawn. He took some questions from reporter, as he likes to do. He was really, really grumpy. He actually told an Australian reporter to shut up. The Australian reporter asked him about, perhaps, is there a conflict of interest with some of your kids' business interests and the fact you regulate them? And he said, your prime minister is coming soon. I'm going to tell him about you. Really was a very grumpy Donald Trump. So let's hope he gets a couple of hours of kip on the plane before he arrives. Yeah. I do think that he'll spend the first day and a half with royalty, with the king and the queen, assuming that she has recovered sufficiently. He will be greeted, we understand, by Prince William and Princess Catherine. He loves the royals. I think that should brighten his mood. Certainly, I think any conversation that he has with King Charles will be very tightly scripted by people at Downing Street. So that will keep conversations in areas that are easier for Trump. And look, King Charles and Trump don't have a lot in common. What are they going to talk about? Climate change? They don't agree on that very much. I think things may get trickier when we get to Thursday, when we have that meeting at Chequers with Keir Starmer, and then a press conference where I think you and I can both bet pretty heavily that the topic of Jeffrey Epstein will come up, and whether Trump can keep his cool with that kind of questioning, I think is open to interpretation.
Yeah, and we have this again. This sort of the world of politics that we all exist in now, Laurie, as you know as well as me, is kind of unprecedented in many respects. Things are happening that you could not write and put in an episode of The West Wing. People would laugh you out the room and say that would never happen. So we've just lost an ambassador to the USA because of his friendship with Epstein, and then a few days later, the American president arrives, who's also a big question mark over his head about his relationship with Epstein and what he wrote in a birthday card. In fact, it was the birthday card stuff that really got Peter Mandelson fired. More so than anything else. So, again, this is a curious sort of synergy moment in terms of this story. And you're absolutely right. At least one journalist is going to fire that question up, right?
Well, you would hope so. I think particularly for Keir Starmer. I mean, I think there are questions that need to be answered about Prime Minister Starmer's judgment. And if I can digress for a moment, seeing that image of Peter Mandelson in his dressing gown, Peter Mandelson submitted that himself. What a bizarre image to submit to something that may later become public. Absolutely nuts.
Yeah.
It's funny because when Donald Trump says that his friendship with Epstein didn't go further than, say, 2004, 2005, there isn't evidence to contradict that. We haven't seen any images of those two men together. You know, we've seen that video of the two of them laughing like drains at an event. The fact that they were friends in a former life is not surprising. They traveled in similar social circles in New York in the 1980s, 1990s. That doesn't surprise me. We haven't seen any images that indicate that they've been friendly since then. I think it seems that we could take Donald Trump at his word there. Yet, it really rattles him. He hasn't figured out how to respond to questions about Epstein, and his administration has given out very, very mixed messages. I think this is one area where he seems to get tripped up and doesn't seem to have the confidence, the almost arrogance that he does when he discusses other issues.
I find that interesting as well, because Trump's a straight talker. In fact, that's his whole shtick. He's a straight talker. And it's very easy to say, look, nobody needs to apologise if you knew someone before it was discovered they were a very bad person. The world is full of cases like that. We all probably knew someone before it was discovered they were an armed robber, or they were, did something else horrendous. But
okay, well, who are your friends, Ian?
Well, it's okay. One armed robber does not in any way define me. I jest. But it's true, isn't it? I mean, I wouldn't criticise Trump because he once hung around with Jeffrey Epstein, because everyone hung around with Jeffrey Epstein. However, it's very. I don't sense. Yeah, I don't sense he sells that message particularly well, given that he's very good at saying, yeah, I used to know him. I found out he was a bad guy, so I no longer know him.
Yeah, it's peculiar. That really rattles him. And I think and he seems to be able to justify or rise above so many other accusations, allegations. For this, it really does rattle him, perhaps because some of his MAGA base, some of the Republican base, seems to be asking more questions than perhaps Donald Trump can answer about this. So it does seem, it doesn't sit very nicely that he really gets rattled here, yet there doesn't seem to be much beyond what we're seeing in terms of that relationship. Really odd.
It would be interesting if Prince Andrew showed up at this banquet somewhere, because, of course, that would bring in a third Epstein connection. So we'd be joining the dots here.
And Andrew played such a role at the last state visit back in 2019. And, back in 1988, King Charles, then Prince Charles, was a visitor to Mar-a-Lago. So the connections between these two families go back quite a long way. But I think it will not be difficult for at least tonight and tomorrow to keep Trump on royalty and all of that pageantry that he likes so very much. He will also be sequestered to a certain extent from any kind of protesters. Most of the outdoor events will be on the grounds of Windsor Castle. Protesters will not be able to get in there, so he will be kept unaware of what is happening. There will be protests in central London, of course, but he'll be separated from that. So that will, I think, keep him on his game.
I think you're right. Listen, on that point, Laurie, thank you. We're going to watch with interest. And, of course, we will speak again, I'm sure, possibly over the coming days. Laurie Laird, US political commentator. I'm actually quite excited about the Trump visit. The most to me, I love all the kind of pageantry stuff that goes with it, and the choreography and, turning up and the handshaking and off they go. There is a moment in all of us, isn't there? I'd love to be in that room. Wouldn't that be like, what's it like, that kind of existence, big banquets and all that go with it, and pressing the flesh and being transported from one very, very important meeting to another, inspecting the soldiers and all that you have to do in those kind of moments. But the bit I'm really looking forward to is going to be a press conference. That's going to be box office. It's always box office when it's Trump, and it's always even more box office when it's Trump with Starmer. And I don't say that as a compliment to Starmer. I say that because you just sit there wondering what the hell's he going to do. So I've got popcorn in one hand and a big fat cushion in another, so I can hide my face as I squirm at what the Prime Minister may well say. The one thing we do know with a visit like this, and Laurie just referred to it, is the huge amount of security that will surround the President. I think there was more controversy when he came last time, and people, I think, under Sadiq Khan's almost instruction, flying that pig thing in the air and thousands of people. I mean, it was the President of the United States, for God's sake, not the President of North Korea. You could understand the odd protest there. But there's going to be some, bit of a, I would say, a nightmare, but I think it's nothing that security services haven't dealt with. Will Geddes, security expert, is with us as well. Afternoon to you, Will.
Very good afternoon to you, Ian. Thanks for the invite this afternoon.
Always a pleasure. And these kind of visits are planned months and months in advance, of course, aren't they, in terms of the strategy for security, which has to be, you know, everyone's at the top of their game for a moment like this.
Yeah, they certainly have to be this week, Ian. In terms of obviously this being a state visit, this is the first one he's done to the UK since 2018, and he was last in power. And this is 2-3 days of his time in the UK, meeting with obviously His Royal Majesty King Charles, but also meeting with Keir Starmer. And as you say, I think popcorn at the ready to see how those meetings go. But the security, he brings a big contingent with him. But we're talking in excess of certainly 25 million pounds in terms of the security costs across Met and Thames Valley Police.
Yeah, absolutely right. And of course, one thing that's great about this country is that we don't have a policy that says you can't protest. We say, yeah, you can protest. And then, and it would be easier, wouldn't it, if there was just a ban on the protest and then they could just make sure all the roads were nice and clear and all the rest of it. And of course, the president won't get close to any of that. But we do have a proud history of allowing people to make their views known while simultaneously inviting people who to some people would be disagreeable.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and I think certainly one of the reasons, from what I understand on his itinerary, even though President Trump has got one itinerary, Melania has got another itinerary. She's going to be meeting with Princess Catherine. She's going to be doing her own thing. But neither of them, as far as I understand, Ian, are going to be coming into London. I think that's probably because we certainly know there is no close friendship between President Trump and Sadiq Khan. And we know Sadiq Khan, the last time, 2018, allowed many sort of anti-Trump protesters to float a big blimp in his image, to cause all sorts of chaos. And also bearing in mind, you know, although Sadiq Khan should be serving Londoners, he doesn't seem to consider that in certain circumstances with many of these protests. And for the police, that would have been a huge weight-bearing load for them to police, obviously, any movements by President Trump in London. So easier that he's outside of London. He's a done checkers.
And I bet the limo driver of the presidential cars thinking, thank God I haven't got to go through those gates again.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would say that certainly in terms of his movements, Ian, he's going to want to probably make it as easy as possible, bearing in mind in the wake of Charlie Kirk's assassination as well, and that Donald Trump was a big supporter of Charlie Kirk. Yeah. Have to include that within the risk assessment, which would be pretty extensive anyway. So over and beyond protesters, there are rogue elements that obviously the police have to prepare for and the Secret Service have to prepare for. So there's a good chance he'll probably be even using Marine One, which is his helicopter, to move from certainly Windsor Castle over to Chequers, and not necessarily go by road.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? The amount of... It's always fascinated me. We had J.D. Vance, of course, in the country a little while ago, and he was staying at Chevening House, which is just around the corner from where I live, so there was a lot of presence of that, and seeing that kind of cavalcade, which frankly I thought was a bit over the top, Will, for the Vice President, but I'm sure he could have got away with a baseball cap and a bike, and nobody would have been any the wiser. But nonetheless, they lay it on thick. I'm sure there's visual reasons for that as well. But the combination of... Obviously, you have his own staff. Some of these vehicles, as I understand it, are literally flown over to, you know, in preparation for these visits. I'm sure some vehicles perhaps might already be here. But it's the mixture of British policing with a visiting security team that I think is quite interesting. That has to be carefully planned out with a lot of trust in each other, I would imagine.
Yeah, I mean, bearing in mind, Ian, that, you know, we are part of the Five Eyes relationship. We share intelligence with the United States, and they do likewise to us. Obviously, the agencies, both MI5 and the CIA, will be coordinating their intelligence and pooling it in terms of any detected threats. GCHQ, the NSA, again, likewise doing their own things. But, yeah, certainly in terms of Trump's contingent, he has about, or will have probably about 60 or so US Secret Service personnel. And that comprises of a variety of different elements, from the technical through to the close personal protection through to the counter-assault team. So these these guys, like you say, they will have been planning for some time. They will be probably traveling with 2 beast limousines. That works very well, both in contingency, if one, for whatever reason, gets itself grounded, as we saw with the Irish embassy a couple of years ago. But also it prevents, obviously, anybody being able to identify or isolate which vehicle the president's going to be in, obviously, whilst they're moving in convoy.
Listen, Will, it's always very thorough stuff. Great to have you on with us. Will Geddes, security expert on the programme. Thank you to him. And, of course, we'll be covering all the salient moments of Trump landing, making his way over to Windsor, meeting the King, the big handshakes, the Keir Starmer bit. I'm sure inspecting the guard, whatever the word, the royal banquet, not that the cameras will be in there for very long. But importantly, any press conference, there will be a press conference, Starmer and Trump. I think that's the sort of slight box office moment, not to underplay the importance of 2 world leaders speaking. And, of course, by the way, I hope our man does good. You know, I want Starmer to succeed as our Prime Minister when he's there with a visiting leader from another country, and a very powerful one at that. Naturally, there's a bit of me, and annoying as it is, irksome, I think the phrase is, as it is, you want the bloke to go, yeah, sell the UK, do well at this, you know, give it large, Keir, make it good. And, you know, this is important to trade, really important to trade. 0344 499 1000 is where you'll find us. Quick word from Roger down in London on this whole debacle with Keir Starmer and Mandelson and God knows what. Roger, what have you got for us? Afternoon.
Oh, hello, Ian. And it should be a fairly simple one. It's just an invitation for someone to tell us.
Roger, we're going to have to try and get you back on a better line because your phone line is cracking up on us, mate. We'll do that and we'll get you back on in a couple of moments. Don't go away. This one from M, who says Keir doesn't want the flag to be hijacked. If so, why weren't the lefty march waving it too? It already has been hijacked. That's why the left and middle classes don't wave it, because they don't want to be shamed and guilty by association. And the only people that can take it back from its ill branding are the middle classes, so it'll never happen. Flags need to be up everywhere, stations, schools, hospitals. It needs to be normalised. I hear you. Thank you for that. 0344 499 1000.
I never wanted to carry a gun. I did carry a gun for a little while, but I didn't really want to do it routinely, and I didn't want my officers to carry it routinely because I never actually felt that that the risk was so great that they needed to do that. We, as you say, we've got highly trained officers in the UK. We can give them more training because there's fewer of them. But we're now in a situation where times have changed, and I think officers do feel unable to be able to protect themselves in serious situations.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
It is Talk. We will do the voice of doom in a sec, by the way, because I forgot to do it in the last section. Robert Redford, let's get it's worth having a word on Robert Redford. Legendary actor and director, has died at the age of 89 in his Utah home. He was known for so much, of course, big movies like Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, All the President's Men. He won 4 Oscars for his directing skills and founded the iconic Sundance Film Festival. Let's speak with Hannah Hope. Hannah, of course, is showbiz editor at The Sun on Sunday. Afternoon to you, Hannah. We should say, I mean, you and I are of only slightly different ages, but he predates us, but we were both aware that this man was huge, he was iconic, and he was a trailblazer and had the most enormously successful career.
Absolutely, he was one of Hollywood's legends,
yeah.
And had several different eras, as you've just mentioned. He was obviously in the cowboy films,
Yeah.
Wild West, and then he ended up being a little bit of a kind of middle-aged woman's heart, like crumpet, heartthrob,
Yeah.
starring in Indecent Proposal.
Did you say the word crumpet then? I love that. We need to bring back the word nice bit of crumpet. We need to bring that back, I think. But he was eye candy. Let's be real about it.
Both of our mums, we were just saying before we came on,
100%.
you know, really like fancied him. And
My mum would have left my dad for Robert Redford. It's a fact. It's a fact.
my mum's going to be quite heartbroken when I speak to her later.
Yeah, I mean, good-looking guy, though.
Absolutely.
You know, and he remained looking good
Yeah,
as well.
he aged very well. And he was also in The Way We Were with Barbara Streisand, which I think is a classic.
Yeah, yeah.
And he founded the Sundance Film Festival. So even within the kind of world and the industry of film,
Yeah.
he did a lot and actually kind of created an actual legacy. Meryl Streep has said that they've lost one of their lions today. Even Donald Trump has been asked about it, having touched down in the UK, saying that he was one of the hottest actors of his time.
Yeah. I'm sure, did Brad Pitt do a movie with Robert Redford? I might be just imagining that because, you know, two good-looking faces on screen at the same, of different eras. But he was, like, what I love about his story, though, he obviously got to a point when he thought, like, I've done so many films and they've been incredibly successful. And yeah, I've done that. So I'm directing. That's something philosophically. He wasn't just, as many people are in Hollywood, you know, somebody spots a good-looking man or woman in a bar. Marilyn Monroe, good example. It turns out she was good in front of the camera, but she wasn't a natural actor as such, whereas he was. I mean, he was the real deal, a proper actor. So I think he believed in, without sounding cheesy, the craft. So getting into directing was no surprise, really, because he felt strongly about filmmaking, not just about being famous.
Absolutely, but what's quite interesting is that it wasn't always his path. He actually got into college on a football scholarship, and he could have been a sports star.
Right.
So he just shows that he was an all-rounder.
How annoying would he have been to be in the sixth form with? You know, oh no, Redford's come in. What's he good at? Everything. Yeah, he acts. Yeah, but I bet he can't play football. No, he can do that as well.
Yeah, he was a jack of all trades. So, yeah, he was obviously sort of a guy who landed on his feet. But as you say, I think he retired from acting and then really focused on his craft and filmmaking. He's got 4 children, and 2 of them have become quite successful in the film industry as well.
Even Donald Trump has led tributes to Robert Redford. Speaking to reporters outside the White House today, the US president said Robert Redford had a series of years where there was nobody better. There was a period of time when he was the hottest. I thought he was great, said Trump. And he was the hottest, or crumpet, as you said. he was all of those things.
Absolutely. And I think that maybe this will be a nice opportunity for people to remember the films that he starred in and take a trip down memory lane.
Yeah, and that's the thing, isn't it? Because like other actors that have kind of crossed different decades in this case. Different parts of their career mean different things to different people. I remember seeing Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid probably when, I don't know how old I was at the time. I've seen it a few times since, and there's some really famous, the bike riding scene in there is really famous. Raindrops Keep Falling on My Head comes from that movie, which people don't think, really? It comes from that film? You know, there's all of these little moments, and different people have kind of different memories depending on their age.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think for me, The Way We Were, where he starred opposite Barbara Streisand, will be the one that sticks in my mind because it was such a classic love story. But yeah, everyone will have different memories. I mean, it's been a tough year for Hollywood greats. Obviously, we also lost Gene Hackman earlier this year. So yeah, we're getting to that kind of end of an era moment.
Indeed. And finally, a point that he said himself on a TV interview in 2018. He said, to me, retirement means stopping something or quitting something. He said, there's this life to lead. Why not live it as much as you can and as long as you can? And he really did, didn't he?
Absolutely.
Good work. Hannah, thank you. Good to see you again. Hannah Hope, showbiz editor at The Sun on Sunday with us on the programme. Let's just very quickly do the Voice of Doom. Voice of Doom, of course, the mystery voice. A reminder of what that voice was. Before the news, we played you this.
Got off to a pretty messy start.
Who the heck is that? It's quite a tricky one. I think it's probably, well, I say this every time, it's the hardest one we've done, and then somebody goes and guesses it. These are some of the guesses. Keir Starmer, don't be silly. It's clearly not Keir Starmer. David Laws, former Lib Dem. Norman Tebbit, no. Vince Cable, no. Robert Halfon, former Conservative, no. Jeffrey Archer, no. Neil Hamilton, no. It is none of those. In fact, we have not got a right answer, which means it rolls over to tomorrow for day... What is it, Amy? Day 4. There'll be day 4 tomorrow. In the meantime, let's go back to your calls. Tom's in Gloucester. On what's going on with Starmer and Mandelson. Got you back, Tom. What are your thoughts? Good afternoon.
Well, he's confused me, and to be quite honest, with his "I didn't know, no one told me."
Poor old man. He just couldn't remember, Tom. Come on, cut him some slack.
I'll tell you for why. I used to be in the Royal Navy as a communicator, and one of the jobs I was sent to do was working at Northwood headquarters in a particularly sensitive part of the operation, suffice to say. In order for me to be able to do that job, I had to be positively vetted. Now, this is just an ordinary Jack Tar going about his business, and they spoke to my bank manager, my parents, my school teacher before I left school, my form teacher, people I'd worked with, my boss before I joined the Navy. Every man and his dog that could possibly have anything to know about me, they spoke to.
Wow.
Now, that was just to work handling a few signals, secret and above. Quite a responsible job.
Yep.
But not as responsible as being the UK ambassador to the United States.
Yeah, it's a responsible gig.
The vetting that this bloke went through must have been as stiff as anything could be.
Well, that's what James Cleverly, former Foreign Secretary, had said in this. He put a tweet out on this very point, Tom, where he said, because obviously the people that work behind the scenes in the Foreign and Commonwealth Office are central to finding out about, you know, the person that's going to be the ambassador and speaking to everybody concerned. And Cleverly said, you know, obviously he left office as Foreign Secretary, but the same people exist there, you know, that do this. And he said they're all they're really top of their tree people. They know their stuff. They could not have possibly missed this one.
No, it must have stood out like a blind cobbler's thumbnail. Honestly, it just doesn't bear any resemblance to the truth whatsoever.
I get it. Listen, Tom, you make a great point. I think, Starmer's sticking with it, isn't he? I didn't if I'd known then what I know now and all that business, and I suppose there's never going to be a way of disproving that, but it does seem to be the way politicians respond. Thank you to Tom in Gloucester, and full house points for reintroducing that old phrase. I think my nan used to do that, a blind cobbler's thumb. That's such a, optically, that's such an incredible moment of clarity in your head as to what that means. This comes from Mark, who says, Ian, it seems like everyone has Farage penciled in to be the next Prime Minister, but a lot of people don't trust him anymore and are switching to Advance UK. That's going to be interesting. Advance UK will either cause a problem or they'll completely disappear by the wayside before we get to another election. Mobilising yourself. Think of how long it's taken for reform to get to this stage and make all the inroads they had to. Whether you love them or hate them, even if you're an Advance UK supporter, it's been a journey of, and I know a little bit about behind the scenes of this because of the people involved, like Richard Tyson, Nigel Farage. I mean, it's been a lot of hard work to get to this stage, and it's never ending. It's a complete cycle. So to start all that again with 3.5 years to go to another election is going to be really hard for Advance UK. They will either, and if you think about a lot of the people that went to the march on Saturday, where Ben Habib spoke at the march, and I thought he spoke really well at the march, many of those people will support Advance UK. Not all. I mean, many of those people aren't even there politically. That's the bit that Starmer and the like kind of can't get their head around. But there will be some people who will. Is it enough to decisively gain parliamentary seats? Remember, Nigel Farage tried 7 times before he became an MP. So it's going to be tricky. It will either be the thing that scuppers reform, because that part of the spectrum vote is split so significantly, or as we advance towards the next general election, Advance decide that they will still be a voice, but they won't be significantly standing. You've got to get a lot of bodies to stand. Even Reform have still got to do that, of course. 0344 499 1000. Lots more to come. Stay with us. Don't be going anywhere. It's just gone 3:30. This is Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
25 to 4 on Talk. Let's get a word on a story that, of course, the sentencing of the story broke yesterday. Constance Martin, the killer mum, sentenced to 14 years for the death of her baby. Details have now emerged that look at the cult that she found herself involved in. Now, in footage obtained by The Sun, she speaks of how the leader of the cult would verbally abuse the disciples, and she was forced to call him daddy. Let's have a listen to what she said.
Really dangerous place to be, and I was only within the church for 6-7 months, and when I came out I was a completely different person. I was unsociable, I couldn't talk to people, I didn't find anything funny, I was really shy, my whole character had switched, and that was only being in there for 6 months. Now I've got friends who've been there for 5, 6, 7, 8 years, And if they ever realised that he was a phony, I honestly don't think they'd be able to carry on living a normal life. Or I definitely don't think they'd be able to integrate back into society easily. And these are young people whose lives have just been wasted inside a compound where they don't leave. And I think that's exceptionally sad, because I don't think they want to live that way. And if they do, it certainly wasn't their intention. They got trapped in it.
It's extraordinary listening to that for a whole lot of reasons. Ed Southgate is with us, news reporter at The Sun, who's been reporting on this. Ed, afternoon to you. Good to see you. I mean, I don't know how many questions there are on this. I mean, the cult thing, that for many people will be the first time they've heard us speak, and I only make this observation because it is naturally you are drawn to say, how did somebody from that background, a very aristocratic, I mean, she's not just a posh girl, she's sort of royal-sounding, sort of aristocratic, grew up with opulence and big houses and mansions and goodness knows what else, and then ended up in a very kind of deranged spiral, which included her years with her months with a cult and her years with a man himself, a convicted rapist. He'd already served time for that, has several babies all removed from her, and then finally her little baby who died, and hence the reason why she's in jail. I mean, this is so messed up across the board. Yeah, it's incredibly messed up. I mean, it's a tragic story just as it is when the story first broke, that their newborn baby had died in freezing conditions. That's tragic, so tragic and so sad. Then you start to hear all the other stuff in the background to it and the lead up to it, and it's just completely unbelievable, really. The cult, the fact that, like you said, she came from this really aristocratic background, a multi-million-pound country estate over in Dorset, which I think was used for a Pride and Prejudice film. Her dad's a former page to the late Queen Elizabeth. And then, she ends up in a relationship with this convicted rapist who served 20 years in an American jail for violent rape, older than her by about 13, 14 years. It's just such an unlikely match, and it's a complete, spiral down. Do we know how they met? They met in an incense shop in Tottenham. It was something like, so she was friends with the shop owner. Mark Gordon was in this shop. The shop owner had to, I think another customer had left their bag or something, so the shop owner quickly left, trusted Constance, like, oh, can you quickly just watch that man? Because I think she must have had suspicions or something like that, being like, he looks a bit shady, she was friends with Constance, so she was like, can you just watch him for me? And Constance was like, yeah, sure. And then they kind of struck up a friendship from there and quickly got into a relationship, and then soon after that she became estranged from her family because I don't think they approved of him. It's funny how your parents don't approve of a man who served 20 years for rape. I mean, goodness me. I mean, and again, you know, we was just saying during the break, Ed, weren't we, that Netflix are full of these kind of documentaries of, the person that fell in love with somebody on death row who slaughtered children or something, and you think, how is there not, but wouldn't by anybody's standards or background, do you not go, hang on, you served 20 years for rape, that's a horrendous crime and a massive prison sentence, you are a wrong 'un, mate. But she decided to have a life with this guy and drop her entire family as a result. She wasn't even asking for money from them. No, it is unbelievable, and I don't think we'll ever really understand why or how that all happened. I think the cult might provide a bit of context, because I think she must have been quite traumatised from that, maybe, I don't know. But it's such an unlikely match, I don't think we'll ever properly understand. And what's surprising from my point of view is how close they stuck by each other throughout both trials. Like, you might expect them to turn on each other, being like, oh, that's what usually happens, isn't it? Exactly. If there's two people, one normally goes, it wasn't me, it was them. Exactly, but that didn't happen. It was very much Mark and Constance against everyone, and that's the point the judge made yesterday when sentencing, actually. He said he didn't buy their pleas of remorse. He didn't think they were genuine, because throughout both trials they've sought to blame everyone but themselves. They haven't taken accountability. To them, they are the best parents, they've done no wrong, it's the police's fault, it's social services' fault, it's our family's fault, it's the public's fault, it's the press's fault, it's for the family courts, it's the NHS, it was everyone but them. I mean, your baby was found in a bag. A little bag for life. In the woods, in the winter. I mean, whose fault is that meant to be, other than the parents who were there throughout? And of course, this wasn't the only child she'd had. No, this was their fifth child. And that's why this all happened. They'd had repeated warnings about looking after their babies, but they had 4 other children taken off them
by social services and eventually put up for adoption by the family courts because they weren't capable of looking after them. I mean, when she was pregnant with her first baby, she was camping in a tent in the woods in Wales. She eventually went to hospital when she was about going into labour, but presented with a fake name. She put on a fake Irish accent, said her name was Isabella O'Brien.
Right.
To try, I think, because at this point she was quite paranoid. She thought her parents were like chasing her and Mark with private investigations and all of that kind of stuff. But there had been a nationwide NHS alert put out, so someone at that hospital recognised her. Was like, this isn't Isabel, this is Constance.
Yeah.
And then social services came to see where they were living, saw they were in a tent, and they were like, this isn't, what are you doing? So from the very first baby, there were issues about how they were caring.
Which is extraordinary, because one would assume that even if her parents disagreed with her choice of partner, and again, understandably so, that she could have still lived a normal life, albeit with a man that was, you know, with a horrendous past. I mean, she didn't have to live like that, one would assume.
No, and she did have access to money, and that's the point prosecutors made in the trial. Like, throughout the time they were on the run and living in hotels or on the land, she had access to a lot of money. She didn't want to use it because if she took it out, they would know where she is.
Yeah, right.
But she had access to money if they wanted to live a normal life. And when they had their first baby, they would have had access to a lot of money as well. But yeah, they obviously went on the run because they didn't want this baby being taken off them by social services.
And I suppose, so she'd been in a cult, she meets this guy, maybe, you know, neurologically, her mind was, you know, in the kind of appropriate gear to fall in love with somebody like this. I don't know, you know, you would naturally, you're slightly drawn to that comparison, aren't you? The bloke in the cult, she used to call him Daddy, because apparently all the disciples had to call him Daddy, and she's had a similar name for her partner here, didn't she?
she called Mark Daddy Bear, so it sounds a bit similar. I don't know if there's anything in that or not, but...
So they've got 14 years each, and he got a little bit more, which I think will be served after, you know, on...
Yeah, like an extended
sort of thing.
Yeah.
So the question, I suppose, would be, you know, does this loyalty, this blind loyalty remain? And, I mean, goodness me, it seems improbable, but it sort of also could do.
Yeah, I don't know.
They just sort of start again in, you know, 9 years' time or whatever it is when they
well, it could be even less, because they've already served...
a couple of years.
They've already served a couple of years, so minus that, they could be out in, 7, 8, 9 years, around that, who knows. But yeah, that will be the most interesting question. What do they do when they get out? Because, like I said, they have stuck by each other throughout this trial. They've been repeatedly told off for chatting to each other in the dock. Each morning they would hug each other. They would kiss each other when they go back to at the end of the hearing. Yesterday she had a bit of an argument with a dock officer because she stopped her from passing notes to Mark because the judge had told them to stop. So they have tried to stand by each other as much as possible. So we'll see. Will they stay together or not? Because I don't know if they'll be able to stay in touch.
It was often said by those that were in the courtroom as well. I think it was on the first trial where she was kind of like almost oblivious to the seriousness of what was going on. And I think at one point asking an usher to go and get her a coffee or something, you know, can I get a Starbucks or something like that? You know?
Yeah, in the second trial, was
that the second trial?
It was the second trial. She kept moaning about how sleep deprived she was. How she couldn't focus, she was falling asleep in the dock. It was on her first day of giving evidence, if I remember correctly. She had been giving evidence for about half an hour, and then she was like, I'm so sorry, I'm so tired, I'm going to have to stop. I need a coffee, I need a break. The judge was a bit like, hey.
You're here on a case where you were accused of the death of your own baby. I mean,
exactly.
That seemed to be almost removed. I mean, you know, I suppose one could look at it and sort of use the kind of catch-all expression that, well, you know, she's clearly mentally ill to some degree, or to a great degree, in I don't know what it would be called in kind of psychology parlance, but, you know, clearly this woman was not wrong. We know he's a wrong, and I mean, but she descended into something.
Yeah, definitely. And her barrister yesterday was talking about how she'd been assessed by medics who reckon she has complex post-traumatic stress disorder. Whatever the symptoms of that may be, and they were trying to make the point that whatever the justification for taking children away from a mother, it will still have profound effects. So I'm sure that probably those children being taken off her, when she in her mind thinks she's the best parent anyway, probably did mess with her a little bit. But I think she was messed up before that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any sympathy with her. But clearly, to do this, to act like this, to be like this, to be with this bloke, you've got to have something really wacky going on upstairs.
Exactly. I think she's deluded. I think she's neglectful, selfish, but she's definitely messed up in the brain.
14 years, Old Bailey trial, very high profile. We mentioned documentaries. I'm pretty sure there's one going to be made of this, isn't there? I mean, I'd imagine people.
I'd be surprised if there wasn't.
Yeah, indeed. But it's ultimately, you know, the centre of the story is the death of a little baby girl who never saw life because it was ended so brutally due to the neglect of her parents.
Exactly, and what's actually really sad about this is that we don't actually know when baby Victoria was born or died, because that was a point that was heavily disputed by the couple and prosecutors, and it never really got agreed upon. The judge decided she probably died before January the 12th. We're not entirely sure when she was born. Constance and Mark insisted that she was born in a holiday cottage on Christmas Eve. Prosecutors thought she was born a few days later. There's no evidence either way. So like you said, she never saw life, and we don't know when she was born. We don't know when she died, or even how she died. That was another point of contention. Was it hypothermia? Was it smothering? It's
many still unanswered questions. Listen, Ed, great to see you. Thank you for coming. Great piece in The Sun today. Really informative stuff. Ed Southgate, who's a news reporter over there at The Sun. Thank you to him. Back to you in a couple of moments. 0344 499 1000.
As you say, we've got highly trained officers in the UK. We can give them more training because there's fewer of them. But we're now in a situation where times have changed, and I think officers do feel unable to be able to protect themselves in serious situations.
There's a variety of people there, and they would have been there for their own reasons. And I think it's very unfair to caricature the Unite the Kingdom rally as some kind of far-right march. But I have to say, some of the selection of speakers was somewhat questionable. Now, irrespective of your views of Elon Musk, I'm not sure if he is the right person in terms of providing us with advice to unite the kingdom, considering in last summer's violent disorder, he talked about how civil war is inevitable.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
10 to 4, Jeremy Kyle's here in around about 10 minutes, but he'll nip in before then to tell us what the heck's going on. It's going to be a busy drive show, I can tell you that much. Chris in Epsom says 3 days of Condor starring Redman was my favourite film, starring Redman and Pitt. There it is, Redman and Brad Pitt. Was The Spy. The Spy Game was very good. Worth. Feet up, bottle of wine, says Chris. Thank you for that. This one from Red. Is it an unlikely match? So-called conspiracies have been flying around since before I was born about cult behaviour around the aristocracy. This is reference to the Constance Martin horrendous story. Eyes wide shut stuff. Andrew's ties with Epstein. I'm not making any allegations. But it is what comes to mind when I hear this. Many people are not aware of things like this with Epstein's Island and types of so-called elites involved. Yeah, I mean, it is also simultaneously, and I say this in no defence because that's a brilliant point, naturally, even if nothing had gone on, those stories would be invented. Some will be true. But it's too tempting, you know, the people that are the rich and the famous and they can do whatever they want, they're untouchable, nobody will ever nick them, and in fact the person that should nick them is also, you know, influential, so therefore nothing's going to ever happen, it's never going to touch the sides, etc. So there is, yeah, maybe something in that. Either way, it is just awful. Penny in Essex, what a dreadful pair. He is a rapist. She comes from aristocracy. They've already had kids taken away from them. I don't believe her. Life and throw away the key. Evil, plain evil. I mean, just that point. Thank you, Penny. He's a rapist. She was an aristocracy. I mean, that would be a plot, wouldn't it, in a mad film, which would either be fascinating or awful. But this is real life, and a little baby died, and I think four other children that they had before, who will never know them, now we hope have, you know, nice, safe lives with those that adopted them. Let's go to Mark in Lincolnshire. Back to the big issues of the day. It's reform, it's Starmer, it's all that's going on in our system, Mark. What are you thinking? Afternoon.
Afternoon, Ian, mate. Yeah, reform. Quickly, only really on reform. Nigel, with his grand plan of destroying the Tories, I think we can see now that plan to destroy the Tories is by actually becoming the Tories. Because that's what it certainly looks like, you know, the amount that seem to be swamping that particular party now.
If you got enough of them in there and enough of the sort of famous faces, and then give it a year, or a year after they win the election, they just change their name to the Conservatives. I suppose you could say the Conservatives are back.
Well, yeah, you pretty much could, couldn't you? Because that seems to be the direction that reform are going. They don't seem overly willing to go grassroots, which is kind of what I thought a lot of people wanted with reform.
Yeah.
That they were looking for just, you know, unknowns, really, you know, people from the business world or whatever. That, you know, those kind of people to come forward, step forward and actually join the party and become politicians, you know, stand for election and whenever the election is, and then become politicians on the back of that. And obviously have a fresh take on everything. Whereas what you're actually going to get is seemingly, you know, because if they keep taking the Tories in, what they're actually going to end up with is the exact same problems that the Tories had, which was this split, which is why I would never, ever vote Tory again, because they're always split between the wets and the slightly more right-wing ones that aren't really right-wing. So, you know, if you've got a party that can't unite behind issues, then you're never going to get anything done anyway, because the will to do those things will never exist.
What do you think of Kruger then, crossing the floor? A man that, you know, wasn't really a household name up until yesterday, but always been sort of widely respected. You know, worked back behind the scenes before he became an MP, 2019. I mean, this guy clearly will be, you know, the Home Secretary or whatever if Reform win. So he's got a high-profile job. Was that a career move for him or a philosophical one?
All I really ever needed to know about Kruger was that he used to write speeches for David Cameron.
Yeah.
And that tells me everything.
Well,
I
that's
need to
kind
know
of where he was. As he was about as centrist a politician as you could get, really. You know, he's from a very opulent background. He went to Eton. You know, his mum does the Bake Off show. He's got, you know, he's from good stock, and he was not remarkable. He was very down the middle. But then, you know, Reform might say, well, we need a bit of that.
Yeah, I mean, you could make that argument to a point.
If you get too much of it, you've lost the essence of Reform, though, haven't you?
Well, precisely. It's like I say, and at the end of the day, if you're not going to put fresh people in there, then what exactly are you reforming? You know, because you can't. If you're going to do this, then stop calling yourself Reform, because you know it's quite disingenuous, isn't it? At the end of the day, because you're not really. People look at a party that's called Reform. What they're expecting is reforming the system.
Correct.
And it seems to me like all Reform want to do is just maintain the system. And they're proving that by the amount of establishment figures that they're putting in. They might not be big.
Well, maybe they just need, maybe they're going to, I don't know, maybe they're going to look for a balance on this. Mark, listen, I've got to finish there because we come to a natural end. Thank you very much indeed for that great point. Brownie in Cambridge says, I was never keen on Butch Cassidy. One of Redford's very best was 3 days of the Condor. The Condor? What is the Condor?
Condor was a pipe,
Condor was tobacco.
Tobacco. I see you. I just thought
What's her name? Sandra Dickinson.
Brilliant. Okay.
Didn't she used to advertise?
Can't remember.
Condor.
How are you? Been watching you. Been brilliant.
Well, you're very kind.
I'm loving it. Loving the energy and the pace. So
what? Oh, you're so kind.
Love you. Love you.
Thank you, my darling.
So that was good. Then one in, one out. Nobody's gone because the plane took off without anybody in.
Well, I love that.
How long has he got, though, seriously? And I saw your question. In all seriousness, I never believed that Mike Graham was right when he was saying 6 months ago he won't last. I used to think Mike was off, but he was right about Trump, but he's right about this. Gone.
To be fair, Mike did do the Mystic Meg column for years.
Septic Peg.
Septic Peg.
Great article by Mikey about the immigration problems today in The Sun as well, which is great. But yeah, just the usual dross. He didn't turn up to face the Commons. That's not good, is it?
That's not really a good look, is it? And I agree with you, Jess. I'd never taken seriously the fact, you know, people go, oh, he's going to last till Christmas or next. I used to think, do you know what, he's going to hang on. Now I'm thinking, I'm not sure.
I don't think he can hang on.
I mean, if Reform win Wales next year, then he's finished, isn't he? I mean,
I think the local elections.
I think I'll make a prediction.